Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick. Hope you really like the intro because there will be just as awesome an outro. And welcome to the first part of my first Transformers series, Transformers Prime, What If Cliffjumper Survived? Before we get into that, please make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me grow up this channel, get more awesome stories pumping out, intros, outros, updates, and etc. to make this channel the best that it can possibly be. And with all that out of the way, we will get into my first Transformers series going into the Prime show. That is, What If Cliffjumper Survived? I'm touching upon this as a standalone because the bootleg sequel to this show was crappy and it was nothing compared to what Prime stood for. So, we're covering Prime, and the first What If is What If Cliffjumper Survived before I cover the live action movies. Now, in the show Transformers Prime, Cliffjumper was one of the Autobots. He was the first one killed in the first episode by the likes of the Khans who blew up the Energon, allowing Starscream to kill him. Him then getting turned into an undead Terracon by Megatron to test out the Dark Energon effects, slicing him in half, and then RC dropping him into the explosion of the Energon mine. So, yeah, for the rest of the series going onward, literally the entire series, Cliffjumper was a memory, a motivator, and a name drop, and something that Starscream used to try and get into the favor of Khans or Autobots. Well, Khans more, but you get my point. It was literally, Cliffjumper was basically like a monument or bragging rights sort of fellow. But we're gonna see what might have happened had one of Optimus Prime's fiercest warriors, Cliffjumper, survived that brutal encounter. Let's set the scene. We get into the first episode. Cliffjumper is in the bottom of the hole where the Energon is, cornered by the Khans. But that doesn't stop old Cliffjumper. Oh no. He takes on the Khans just like he did in canon. But this time, he is actually able to put up more of a fight and doesn't lose the one of his horns that was knocked off by the Khans and is able to avoid getting the Energon blown up. So, he manages to stay in that field until Team Prime shows up and they beat the Khans and force Starscream and the warship away. So, it's the best way we can honestly make Cliffjumper survive, is by him literally putting up a better fight, since Khans in the first few episodes were definitely buffed way more than they needed to be. And this makes Starscream angry because here, him and the Khans had a first field advantage to not only get the Energon, but take out one of Optimus's fiercest Autobots. And they failed, but they can't do anything now. And they just go away. Now, there's not going to be any RC or Jack or Miko or Raphael. No human encounters, Nurse Darby, none of it. Except Fowler, which I mentioned before. Because Cliffjumper is still alive, which means that RC wouldn't want to go out and reluctantly protect humankind. So she would still remain with Cliffjumper, and the Autobots would remain in their own field of operations and at their base. And this would honestly make Optimus happy, because not only can they protect humanity and keep their identities more of a secret on the field of what they're trying to do, but they have Cliffjumper around, which is a great warrior, and it really helps RC's motivation. So if it hadn't happened already, which I guarantee it did, especially if we didn't know too much about Cliff on Cybertron, this means that Cliff would be fully exonerated into Team Prime, which would be a definite dub for Cliffjumper. We then get Megatron returning from his long journey on Cybertron for the Dark Energon. But there's not going to be a Terracon Cliffjumper. So, the Dark Energon and how it's used is going to be slightly different, yet not too different. But before we get into that, just a few things more or less. First, the Decepticons they keep working in the Energon mine. Since there's no Terracon Cliffjumper, that means that they get more done, and there's few extra cons to help them with their workload, which is really not too big a deal, but something worth pointing out. Then we get Agent Fowler's introduction, which he would be less angry at Team Prime for RC, Bulkhead, and Bumblebee not being on the road causing a ruckus with the cons and everything, and would tell them about the Energon mines, and that Megatron came back, which they would obviously know. Megatron and the Dark Energon, you might ask? He tests it on a lonely Viacon trooper, so honestly, it's not as much as the Cliffjumper Terracon, but it's still something to test it out. And Megatron would take care of this Viacon Terracon much easier than the Terracon Cliffjumper. I mean, he barely broke a sweat with that either. But Team Prime and Cliffjumper arrive in the Energon mine and get a first-hand look at a mangled, injured Terracon Viacon trooper. That's a mouthful. And him and the Energon mine are blown up and disposed of. So honestly, all of this goes the same except Cliffjumper's there, and it's a different way of getting the Dark Energon. Megatron sucks the Dark Energon into a spark, and Starscream takes over while Megatron goes to revive more Terracons. And since there's no humans, Bumblebee, Bulkhead, and RC, along with Cliffjumper, are the only ones at the Autobot base when Optimus and Ratchet leave to go confront Megatron. RC still wants to go on patrol because she doesn't feel like standing around and doing nothing. That side of her wouldn't go away just because Cliff's around, and would ask Cliff to accompany her because they're partners, leaving Bumblebee and Bulkhead alone at the Autobot base when Fowler shows up demanding to know about the explosion of the mines. But it goes much easier and simpler to a level because the humans aren't there to make Fowler more angry at the Autobots with contact with civilians. So it goes sort of easier, except, you know, Fowler's still Fowler at this point. He then gets captured by Laserbeak, Soundwave, and gets interrogated by Starscream to learn more about the Autobot base. And that pretty much goes all per the usual. And meanwhile, Bulkhead doesn't want to rescue Fowler because he even said Fowler's a jerk, especially at this point in the series, because he didn't get rescued or have a reason to think differently, even if the conversation went nicer. But Bumblebee would say that even if we wouldn't understand what he's saying, he was always translated, he would say that they need to rescue Fowler or their base could be in jeopardy and his life. So, reluctantly, Bulkhead agrees, and the two of them make their way towards the Khan's warship to go and rescue Fowler. Meanwhile, Optimus and Ratchet would have their usual fight with the Terracon army, which would go exactly the same, really. There really wouldn't be anything here to change. And then, soon enough, RC and Cliffjumper help Bulkhead and Bumblebee, and it's much easier without any human interference, hashtag the kids, and they're able to get this done much faster and smoother, and are able to rescue Fowler and force Starscream away, and get more done on the Khan's warship, and get more Khans out of the way, especially with Cliff there. And then we get to one of the many beatings that Megatron would give his poor old second-in-command, Starscream. We then get to the Decepticon space bridge, and the Autobots confronting Megatron and their army, ready for Megatron to resurrect the dead on Cybertron. Except Cliffjumper's there, and his help is definitely, especially with what they did on the warship, it's definitely noted that this is trouble for the Khans, especially for Megatron trying to resurrect his undead army. And Starscream is annoyed by this and scared because he had a chance to kill Cliffjumper, and it was just taken because of that stupid Optimus Prime. But Megatron says that that sounds like a you problem to Starscream, and that just makes him more of a failure, and he would just lambast Starscream, which would honestly be really funny. And then we get to Megatron and Prime's fight at the Decepticon space bridge, with Optimus still forcing Megatron away. and then Megatron going to confront the Autobots after they shut down and reverse the current of the space bridge. But Cliffjumper takes the shot instead of RC, pushing her out of the way so that he takes the shot instead. With that, the Decepticon space bridge explodes with Megatron in it. When they get back to the Autobot base, RC is very worried and upset because she thinks that she's about to lose another partner. But Cliffjumper says, nah. Does RC really think that little of him? He's been through a lot worse, and it's going to take even a lot more than a Dark Energon Megatron who was just sucked in by an explosion to get rid of old Cliff. And RC just smiles. Cliff's still got his ego and his personality, and yeah, she more or less is just thinking back to Tailgate, and it just sits with her well that Cliff's gonna be okay. With that, Starscream is the leader of the Decepticons, just like in canon at this point. What will change with Cliff still alive that's already affected the story? How will the further results lead without Miko, Raphael, and Jack? Will they live, or will it be even more trouble than canon?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
It's time to get buck wild.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 2 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, before we get into the second part of this Transformers Prime series, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me grow up this channel and get more awesome stories pumping out, etc., etc. Basically, makes me happy, which in turn makes you guys happy with the stuff that comes onto this channel. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the next part of this particular tale. Now, we've just gotten Megatron getting blown up at the space bridge, and Starscream is the new leader of the Decepticons. He goes on to the journey to find Skyquake and awaken him, and failed to bring him under his knee. Optimus, Bumblebee, and Skyquake then have a brawl, with Starscream picking up an energy surge from space, Megatron, and Skyquake getting killed by Bumblebee and Optimus. That whole episode goes exactly the same. But then we get to something big. The Arctic Find. The Scraplets. Optimus and RC still go to the Arctic, but Cliffjumper is along with them because Cliffjumper's been with RC since the beginning, and since he's lived, it's literally what he would do. So, why not? So, like canon, Ratchet, Bulkhead, and B are all at the base, except there's no Miko, Jack, or Raphael there. And therein lies a big problem that almost ended this story, to be completely frickin' frank with you. Now, here's the question. With no humans and not even Fowler at their side, do the Scraplets take over the base, kill the bots here, and then Optimus Prime and Cliffjumper die in the Arctic? Wrong. Beforehand, Wheeljack had actually been brought in a little bit earlier and had gotten onto the comlink with the Autobots. Bulkhead then brings this up and said Jackie should be here soon from what they had picked up. And if there's anyone who's going to save them from the Scraplets here, or even save Prime, RC, and Cliffjumper, it's gonna be Jackie, and that he needs to go out, alert Wheeljack so he doesn't get feasted on and this whole plan goes awry. So Ratchet and Bumblebee are left at the base alone to hide themselves and fend themselves off from the Scraplets for as long as they can, because the base at this point is lost without any human to help them. Soon enough, after some time after Bulkhead's departure, the Scraplets invade and almost kill Ratchet and Bumblebee. But Wheeljack's ship shows up with Bulkhead on tow with Wheeljack, and they escape the base. Now you're probably wondering, with Wheeljack being brought in an episode or a few episodes early, where's Makeshift and that whole plot? Well, that's the thing. That's not happening quite yet. The whole Makeshift thing, that's going to be put on for later and everything. Because Wheeljack would be coming in an episode early during the Scraplet siege because of Cliffjumper being alive and the timing of many of the events being a little bit ahead in a way, because of not even just with Cliffjumper surviving, but no humans. You know what I'm saying? So when Wheeljack rescues them, he wants to know what happens as they're flying away from the now Scraplet-infested base. Ratchet just tells him that the base was just attacked by Scraplets. It was a Scraplet trap. And then he remembers something. Ratchet tells Wheeljack they need to head to the Arctic as fast as they can. Optimus, RC, and Cliff are all in danger of near death from overexposure to the Arctic, and without a ground bridge to help them, they need to speed it up quickly and get them back, along with finding a new base, because the cons are a danger now without them having a base. They got a lot to work with right now. Wheeljack says that can happen, but with boosting up the engines for the ship and the fact of being exposed to the Arctic, they're going to need help, and they're going to need to make it fast, because this isn't an easy feat that they can accomplish. And also, who knows if any Scraplets leaped onto the ship? Bulkhead says that why not just contact Agent Fowler and he can help out with the whole procedure, along with getting them a new base. And Ratchet's like, he didn't even think about that. So, yep, he smiles at Bulkhead and says, good job, Bulk, you're using the old noggin, because at times Bulkhead wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. Fowler gets a call and says that he will help out with the whole procedure and get a base for them once they rescue Prime and the other two. He would mainly argue on the side of Prime because it's all he really talked about. Wheeljack's ship arrives in the Arctic with Prime and RC still functioning to a degree along with Cliff, but they're very, very, very near death from how Optimus and RC were in canon, and Cliffjumper's looking a lot worse for wear. They get on the ship, and soon enough, Fowler does as he said. He gives them a new base, a military hangar, the same one, mind you, that the bots got after they lost their base in canon at the end of Season 2. So they're getting that a lot sooner because of the Scraplets. Optimus and RC come out okay, along with Cliffjumper, but it does take longer to defrost them and heal them because they were very, 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 very close to death. Wheeljack says that they got extremely lucky, especially with him coming, and that they're looking a lot worse for wear, but at least they're alive. Optimus smiles and thanks Wheeljack profusely for this, because if it weren't for Wheeljack, they would have all died, and literally that's how it would have gone. And he couldn't be happier to have Wheeljack as their saving grace. And Cliff and RC are very happy to see him and to have him save them. Optimus then asks about the base, and Ratchet says that the base is lost, and this is their new base. Unfortunately, they had to move because the scraplets are what were in that thing that they found in the Arctic, and they almost perished. And as they've all agreed, if it weren't for Wheeljack and Bulkhead, they would have all been scrap. Optimus says that it's ultimately what not so much had to happen, but it just was inevitable. All that matters is that they have a new base now, and the cons shouldn't be tracked onto their signature, especially with everything that just went on, even with Wheeljack coming to Earth. And if anything, the cons could be more attracted to their old base, and the scraplets could be a little bit of a problem for them, but who knows? All that matters is that they're alive and that they're safe for now. Soundwave relays some information to Starscream, but Starscream says he already heard and saw about what happened, and that whole Wheeljack coming to Earth thing and them leaving with a bunch of other bots, and that must have been the Autobot base. But what could have caused them to retreat from it? And it must have been a scraplet trap or some sort of alternate thing. But Starscream really doesn't care what caused the bots to vacate, even though they can't find their location now. All that matters is, for all they know, one or two or more of them could be dead or gravely injured, and it shouldn't take them too long to maybe find the new place of which they're at now. And honestly, it's just a minor setback to not find them, but Starscream's in a good mood now to not let such a thing bother him. Now, the next episode is the discovery of the Dingus, which is the thing from Mech, the episode where Mech debuts, with Cliffjumper being the only change, along with the humans not being there, and the debut of Silas and Mech. Optimus, however, in this part, doesn't get hit by the tree, by the cons, which was a very silly, stupid, and weird moment for Prime, honestly. But Cliff is right near Prime, so he doesn't allow the cons to hit him with the tree and shoots the cons down, allowing Optimus to drive in vehicle form and shoot straight at Mech and Silas away from the train so the rails aren't blown up, and Silas and Mech retreat, with the Dingus being carried much more safely. We then get to the episode of Knockout and Breakout's debut, with Soundwave collecting the Harvester, giving it to Starscream in much more good fashion, with no kids to really do the whole process. Bulkhead still breaks the Harvester, and that goes the same, really, except Cliff's there and there's no human element besides Fowler. Knockout and driving with the humans, besides Jack and the others not being involved and Knockout not getting his door handle removed, that whole episode plays out the same, except it's kind of an episode purely for Knockout, and he gets punished way worse. We then get to a moment where Cliffjumper and RC are out on a scouting mission and find a very peculiar ship, which RC starts to find familiar, kind of alongside Cliff. How do they know this person's ship, or this ship in general? What will happen with the future of the story?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Pray for mercy from Puss. A puss.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 3 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, before we get into today's episode, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me make this channel bigger, better, and get more awesome stories pumping out. Makes me happy, which will in turn make you guys happy. You guys know the drill by this point. With all that out of the way, let's get into the third part of this story. Now, in the last part, we closed off with Cliffjumper and RC finding, on a scouting mission, a all too familiar ship. They both look at each other because even Cliff knows who the ship belongs to. But he tells RC before they really want to make sure, they should scope the area and really brace themselves in case they know or want to be sure. And soon enough, they find the tree with the acid like RC did in canon. And now RC is like, yeah, it's definitely her. Arachnid. And Cliff is like, RC, you gotta keep yourself composed, because he was there the day Tailgate was murdered. He saved her with Bumblebee, and RC is just looking down, remembering, and yeah. But Cliff says RC's gotta pull herself together, and that he is still here. And look at what they've done as partners. They will find Arachnid, and they will avenge Tailgate, but they gotta be smart about it. They can't let anger over the loss of a comrade get to their heads and ruin what could be putting Arachnid down for good. So, he just tells RC they're gonna keep up with this mission, they're gonna find Arachnid wherever she is, and they're gonna do what they came out here to do along with that, but they gotta keep themselves composed, and they gotta do it together. And with that, RC agrees, and the two set out on two separate sides of the forest. RC, on one side, finds Arachnid about to feast on a human, and she has the same first fight with her as she does in canon, with the fight mostly kind of being even, but RC pretty much taking the high ground before Jack canonically stepped in. Meanwhile, Cliffjumper on the other side approaches the ship and sees the Energon and just, boom, blows up the ship. And Arachnid sees the explosion and she's like, no. And with that, she's perfectly distracted for RC. And RC just continues to pummel on her, and soon enough, Cliff arrives on the scene, even though RC really doesn't need help. And now, Arachnid knows who blew up her ship. And with that, she curses to get revenge and drills down underground and retreats from Cliff and RC. And with that, Cliff and RC know that they haven't won, but they did. So they beat Arachnid, but they're still going to have to watch out for her in the future. And with that, they go back to base. Soon enough, we get to the episode where Optimus gets the Cybonic Plague and has to be saved. And this time, along with B and RC, Cliff goes to the Khan's warship so that way they can try and find a way to get Optimus help. And soon enough, they come across Megatron, and RC and Cliff both aim their weapons, like, to finish Megatron. But Ratchet mentions that Megatron might be the only one to help get Optimus back to the way he was. And B offers, like in canon, to enter Megatron's brain and find out. And he does. And soon enough, Megatron inside his own head realizes Bumblebee is real, gives him the formula, escapes after being tricked into Bumblebee's consciousness without anybody knowing, and RC, in one of the coolest moments of her character, shoots at Megatron's lifeless body in stasis and escapes through the ground bridge. Cliff? Oh, since he's there, when B and RC escape, Cliff takes a shot of his own, straight at Starscream's face. So, yeah, this not only puts the attention on Megatron, who's just been shot his lifeless body, since we know where he went, but Now Starscream has to be cared for attention with a shot directly at his face. So now Knockout and Soundwave have to tend to both things, which isn't too big of a deal for Starscream, but they do have to worry about both problems, so it's a bit of a bother. Meanwhile, Megatron is in Bumblebee's consciousness and finds the Dark Energon, but it's at a new base and Cliff's around and there's no human, Raphael. So even with those very small changes, it means that regardless, Megatron comes back. There's nothing stopping that. So Megatron comes back and he punishes Starscream something fierce, as we know he loves to do. And on one hand, he should be furious at Starscream for wasting the opportunity after he hears about the Scraplets and what they had been uncovering about what happened to the Autobots. How they wasted such perfect opportunities like Starscream did when he had that chance to kill Cliffjumper before he came back the first time. But on the other hand, the Autobots have had just as many downgrades as the cons. Well, they kind of did in canon. Sometimes one side more than the other. But point is, Starscream's punishment of what Megatron gave him in canon and here, since that wouldn't change, is punishment enough. And Starscream's just left to vent and stew on this until Megatron leaves. And that's when Starscream acts with the shard he pulled from Megatron's chest to not only revive Skyquake and get his revenge, but to empower himself. So, eventually the Autobots pick up on this. And while RC would be on bridge duty, Cliff is there. And since they have a new base, which they know where it is, they bridge to the location of which this origination of Dark Energon's coming from, but they're not worried about bridging back since they could just get back. So, the whole Team Prime goes. Starscream's arm is shot off by Prime, and he manages to, even though there's no humans for a distraction point, he manages to still escape, and actually with his arm. And there's not going to be 2 ground bridges because number 1, there's no humans. Number 2, there really wouldn't be a need for the bots to open another ground bridge because 1, there's no bots here to speak of. And even if Fowler knew how to activate the ground bridge, there wouldn't be a need at this point. So, nothing's stopping the Autobots from seeing and eventually having to confront the Terracon, the undead Skyquake. Will they be able to beat the Skyquake since they didn't fight him in canon? Or will they lose to this monstrous behemoth?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive. Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick and part 4 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, before we get into today's episode, be sure as always to smash the like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me grow up this channel and we can get more awesome stories pumping out. Makes me happy, which will in turn make you guys happy, and all of that fun stuff. And with all that out of the way, let's get into part 4 of the story. Last time we left off, Skyquake was successfully brought back from the dead, and Team Prime was left to fight it with no 2 ground bridges happening, so they actually have to face him. And it's not left to the humans this time, which they do. all of Team Prime, including Cliffjumper, fights Skyquake Terracon, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Oh, they're making leeway with holding him back, but it's not seeming to actually take care of him. So, Terracon Skyquake just keeps advancing towards them, and even after he loses an arm, the arm is able to move on its own like Cannon, and this is causing to be a little bit of trouble. Starscream eventually returns, successfully able to see his creation, and is definitely liking what he's seeing. But soon enough, that begins to change. With Cliffjumper there, true, if Team Prime was just there by themselves to fight Terracon and Skyquake, they would be able to win without probably any losses. But Cliffjumper being there is cause for concern because it's actually starting to slow him down. Starscream is ready to interfere and shoots a rocket, but Cliffjumper, in his quick thinking, he grabs the rocket and literally throws it straight back at Starscream, who is terrified and gets caught in his own explosion. So, yeah, that was really something that I don't think any Autobot ever did with Starscream's rockets, but with Cliff, we can definitely expect it. It would be an awesome moment. And with Starscream knowing he's pretty much lost, he just shoots at the Autobots and runs. With this, Optimus is quite surprised and proud of Cliffjumper doing that, and the fact that they made it out of that, especially with what they were dealing with. And Cliffjumper says he's happy to serve. And after this, Starscream is going to be recovering for not too much longer like in canon, but he is going to be recovering for much longer because you don't come back from getting a rocket of your own making thrown at you and your arm missing just like that. So, for now, Bulkhead rescues Breakdown like the canon episode, and Arachnid and Silas team up, except this time, it's not against Jack and RC that Arachnid and Silas are teaming up. It's against Cliff and RC. So, no humans are involved, but it's still a decent cause for concern. Cliff and RC take the bait and are surrounded by Mech, Silas, and Arachnid. Cliff is the test subject and is knocked unconscious, while RC has her next encounter with Arachnid, which plays out the same, except there's no Nurse Darby there to get in the way. Meanwhile, Mech is just about to cut in to Cliffjumper, but in typical Cliff fashion, he just shoots the humans away, like he said so himself that he did in the first episode. Arachnid is frozen temporarily, scans Fowler's copter, and flees the scene. The next episode would play out the same, with RC and Bulk on a mission, except there's no Miko there, and they face Breakdown and Arachnid as they do. Except Cliff would be there because, obviously, and that would make the whole Breakdown and Arachnid case not as bad. Basically, Bulkhead and RC wouldn't get stuck together. But Arachnid and Breakdown would, and they return to the Khan's warship. After this, RC and Bulkhead, they would go on the underground mission into the mines whenever Megatron's planning on killing Starscream, and Cliff would be there too. So, the three of them are all there by themselves to see Megatron about to snuff Starscream. And they promptly are spotted and they have to face against Megatron. Starscream, seeing that this is literally no way for him to win, and knowing what Cliff and the other bots did to him, he just books it. But Cliff ain't about to let him escape again. He literally turns into vehicle mode and smashes Megatron in the face just to get him out of the way so he can chase after Starscream. So it would be a very funny moment just for Megatron just being in the way and then trying to shoot at Cliff, leaving Bulk and RC to promptly face Megatron alone. But isn't that big of a deal, not even for RC, who, in her typical fashion like in canon, shoots Megatron's blaster upwards so that the mines are crashed down by the rubble and the rocks. So, not a big deal. But what is a big deal is Cliff and Starscream make it out of the mines as Cliff was chasing Starscream and he was already running. And they see what happened. Now, Starscream, like in canon, he's elated about this and really doesn't care about the fact that his master is under rubble. He did just try to kill him. But Cliff says it's not just Megatron that's down there. Bulk and RC are down there too. He knows that Starscream's not going to care anything about that. But Cliff says to Starscream he hopes he realizes that if the other cons find out what Starscream did, ain't no coming back from that. And he doesn't expect Starscream to go anywhere, and literally holds him at blaster point to go and rescue Bulk and RC. Doesn't really care for Megatron. And Starscream doesn't have a choice. Bulk is able to hold back the rubble, but they're in a different location, so it would be a little bit different. They probably wouldn't even have to hold up any rubble since they were all together. Once Starscream and Cliff get down into the mines, RC just wastes no time in wailing on Starscream something fierce and holding him at blaster point. He wouldn't have to hold any rubble, like I said, since they're in a different location, but he would still find Megatron and they would return to the ship. After that, Arachnid would take control of Starscream's place and they would go on the mission that they did in the next episode. Starscream's whole redemption to the Decepticons. God no, we had enough of that. But there's one big thing that changes the course of this episode. Starscream didn't kill Cliffjumper, so he doesn't have that to hold on to. Well, obviously, since it's the name of the tale. But point is, he doesn't have that to hold on to, nor will it be held against him. So Cliff is there whenever Arachnid and Starscream are in the Harbinger. Arachnid still tries to hold RC at point, but it's Cliff who comes up and tells her to release her. And Arachnid flees to go find the immobilizer. Optimus tells RC about going off on her own, but RC says that it was for Tailgate because she still lost Tailgate, even though Cliff's alive. And honestly, Cliff is the only one who really resonates with RC and her loss. Starscream then says he wants to be on their side, but Cliff, RC, and Bulkhead ain't buying it for one dang second. Even if they didn't know at the time that Starscream was the one who killed Cliffjumper, like, either way, they ain't gonna trust Starscream, especially with Cliff there. But Optimus says the whole thing about everyone possesses the ability for change, which is true to a level, but that's an entirely other story. Cliff says that he could stay behind with Starscream while they go chase after Arachnid, because if someone like RC or Bulk were to stay here, Starscream would probably try something and like get onto them. But him specifically, he was the first target of Starscream back whenever they first came to Earth. So if anything, this is perfect for him. He stays behind, makes sure Starscream doesn't get into trouble, and RC, even though Optimus is telling her to not go after Arachnid, this is honestly the best thing that they can do. And he tells this to Optimus specifically. Optimus agrees with this on a level, but is still uneasy about RC going after Arachnid again. But honestly, throughout the series, it was just inevitable that they fight. So he agrees with this plan, and RC is glad to be going after Arachnid, and Cliff making this plan. Meanwhile, Arachnid gets the immobilizer, and Bulk, like Cannon, is the first to be immobilized. But RC is there to accompany Optimus, Bulkhead, and Bumblebee, so she's extra help to stop Arachnid. But that doesn't stop her from being the next one to get immobilized. Arachnid would have targeted her first, but honestly, she wasn't expecting her to just come out of the woodwork and be with the bots. On a level she was, but it was still unexpected. But this time, Bumblebee and Optimus are able to break the immobilizer and make Arachnid flee. Not just Bumblebee. Meanwhile, Starscream is trying to plead his case that he's a good guy now and everything. But since Cliffjumper's there, he has no deaths on his streak. Cliff still tells him at blaster point to just keep quiet, because even though he didn't kill anybody, Cliff ain't gonna take the whole thing about the cons and him almost killing him back whenever they first came to Earth. And that Starscream is far from a good guy, and he doesn't want to hear any of it. And Cliff's not gonna be easy to take the bait like RC was. Optimus and Bumblebee arrive on the scene with nothing have happened. Cliff has just been holding Starscream there and making sure he doesn't do anything. Optimus, he still believes that Starscream can change, and he agrees they're going to take him back to the base. But he's going to be kept under safeguard, literally safeguard, and he ain't going to be doing anything until they are sure they can trust him. RC and Bulk are completely against this plan because it's Starscream, and Starscream, he could be useful in the future. But is he planning anything? How will Starscream actually being with the bots go? How long will it last? Especially with the new base and not their old one. And how will it go with Cliff still alive?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out on the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive. Hello everyone, welcome to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 5 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now before we get into this part, which has quite a lot in terms of the story, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you don't miss any stories. We can help grow the channel, and we can help make more stories that will appease not only the people we have here, but future people to come. And with all that out of the way, we shall begin today's part of the Cliffjumper tale. Last time, Starscream was officially let into the Autobot base, but he ain't good. He's just under management because Cliff's alive, so there'd be no reason for him to go off on his own. Yet. And he's very valuable. Just like the Energon, the synthetic formula Energon device that Miko ran into in canon, and then Bulkhead got that formula in him and everything. Yeah, that's not gonna happen because Miko ain't there. So it's questionable, and possibly like one of the Autobots or cons would run into it and then Bulk would just get it that way. But honestly, I really don't think that that would happen. Rather, Ratchet would study upon it and get the synthetic formula that way, except I think that while it wouldn't be more advanced than it was, it would be a little bit better, and he would still try to test it on himself. Be it if Fowler was around, if he was alone, and it's a new base because the whole scraplet thing, and he tests it on him regardless because Ratchet. And with that, also, RC is not going to get cornered by the cons in the pursuit of the Energon because Cliff is there to assist her, and he would fight the cons alongside RC, or at least try to avoid them. Ratchet would pull up over the comm signal and tell Cliff and RC to get the Energon, and just he'll bridge them back to base. Because even if there's two of them and the whole team, they can't do this by themselves. And it's a hunt for Energon, and mainly because he has the synthetic Energon and he wants to fight. But Cliff over the comm signal just tells him, no, Ratchet, we got this. We'll be able to handle getting the Energon and taking care of the cons. But Ratchet's just like, don't be a fool, and he really wants to get in there and help because the Synthen. And with that, he also brings up the fact to Cliff that someone very reliable, the one who even made up the idea in the first place, needs to watch over Starscream. And while it's arguable that Cliff would just say, why can't you? He does know that Starscream could pull some tricks, especially on Ratchet. And not to be rude, but he's the weakest out of all of them. So, Cliff reluctantly bridges back with RC, or at least retreats, and Starscream is left just sitting in his own little area in the Autobot base, just like taking all of this in, pretty much. After that, Ratchet just does his whole thing about taking care of the cons in a very, very enthusiastic style with the synthetic Energon, and they return to base. After that, the Autobots get to see firsthand the synthetic Energon. And like I said, I would like to believe that it's at least a little tiny bit more controllable, but honestly, it was even uncontrollable when Knockout tested it, so I really wouldn't promise anything in the regards of that, because that was way later when Knockout was testing it. Either way, Cliff is there to also see the effects of it and know why Ratchet wanted to help so much. Whenever Ratchet is still told by Optimus to stay behind and just to be the medic, and Ratchet's going to sneak the synthetic Energon that second time, he doesn't get the chance because of a certain someone in the base. He then, right before he grabs it, feels his chest explode with pain. Starscream had seized the opportunity and impaled Ratchet the same way he did with Cliffjumper. So in this story, Ratchet takes Cliffjumper's death. Ratchet just looks up at Starscream, just a mixture of anger and confusion, but he should have expected this, and just his dying gasp there, he's able to still function with the Synthen holding him from dying because Megatron impaled him, or at least punched him really hard, but he's still dying. And Starscream just looks down at him saying, you really shouldn't have hogged that Synthen for yourself, and you just gave me the perfect opportunity to take advantage of you Autobots. And not only will this give me the perfect advantage against Megatron, but Prime and your little friends are all doomed now that Starscream has the synthetic Energon. This is Starscream speaking, obviously. And with that, it should have been obvious. I have a what-if plan for Starscream joining, but this wasn't it, obviously. It's about Cliffjumper. And he swipes the Synthen, blows up a part of the base as a distraction, and yeets himself out of there in plane mode. And with that, Starscream's on his own, and the bots just see a dying and now dead Ratchet on the ground, covered in Synthen under him. Prime is utterly torn apart, because if you've seen the live actions, Optimus was furious when Ratchet died, and the same would apply here. because Ratchet was his closest friend, the one who'd been with him since he was Orion Pax. And Cliff, he should have known. He really, really just expected Starscream to take advantage of this. He knew he had a gut feeling, and he just... Starscream was never going to come around to them, that he was just waiting for an opportunity. He feels like it's half his fault. Fowler comes in to see what all the commotion was about because of the rocket explosion and all the yelling, but then he sees Ratchet's body on the ground, covered in synthen, and it's like, yeah, kind of an awkward and bad time to go ahead and yell. And meanwhile, Starscream is just flying away until he reaches the Harbinger, where Arachnid found the immobilizer and where Starscream and Cannon set up shop. And he's going to do the same here with Synthen. He empowers himself with it, and now we have Starscream with synthetic energon. And with this gives him a sense of just morale, because he's not like the Cannon Starscream who just flew off and just waited. This is giving him like the real morale to do something, and he finds the clones in the ship like Cannon pretty much a season early. And with that, we have Starscream clones, but with synthetic energon, meaning these are stronger clones. With this, Starscream's whole plan thing is coming way earlier, but he's not going to exact it yet, because he feels a disturbance within the Earth. The rubble beneath them is sort of shaking, it's quivering. And him and the clones go inside the Harbinger and decide that they're going to wait to attack either Megatron or the bots, especially since he killed one of them. He's done a good deed to him. And they just need him and the clones to analyze what's going on before they go and exact revenge on Megatron. Meanwhile, the Autobots grieve heavily for the death of Ratchet, way more so than Cliffjumper, even though Cliffjumper was referenced throughout the entire dang series. And Optimus especially would be heartbroken by this. And even though he feels responsible, even though it was his closest friend, and even though Starscream has destroyed a part of their base, swiped the Synthen, and killed a dear comrade, all of what they've been through, they're still here. So, they need to worry about Starscream at a later point, whatever. For now, they need to worry about the eventual, and this would span over the course of that episode and into the next, the eventual rising of Unicron the Destroyer, which they don't know yet, but Prime has suspicions. And they also gotta worry about Megatron and things like that. But Cliff and other bots start to speak up about the matter, because Cliff says he feels really responsible for the death of Ratchet because he's the one who brought Starscream in and recommended the idea. So if anything, this is his fault. Starscream was after him from the get-go. So he's gonna really take this hard. And RC, she can't bear to see her partner, who's always been like courageous and like, you know, easygoing, to be in this state of like slump, to feel like he failed as a team member. And this hits her hard too. And Bulkhead hits him hard, and B, everybody. And Bulkhead says, what are they going to do about a ground bridge now? I mean, all the bots know how to manage the ground bridge, but Ratchet was the main one behind that. He was always doing it. It's going to be harder without him around. And after some silence and some thinking, Fowler decides to pluck up courage. And he tells the bots he will manage the ground bridging operations and talk to his superiors to have more time here with the bots, since they are at his hangars. And that he had seen, even though he wasn't around all the time, especially since they moved bases way earlier than in canon, he got to see Ratchet perform with the ground bridge a lot more. So that means the Fowler is actually the best choice at this time to be able to manage the ground bridge. So the bots are like, you know, it's like the whole Ratchet thing, but it's the best that they can work with. Meanwhile, Megatron, hears about the whole Starscream incident and that he's just off somewhere, and that one of the Autobot signals seemingly has disappeared. But he pays mind more to the prophecy of him and the Dark Energon. But when the Autobots arrive there and attack the cons for the power source, the humans aren't involved, meaning Raphael isn't shot, and Optimus and Bulkhead still, along with Cliffjumper, head aboard the ship and steal back the power source. So the only difference here is that Raphael does not get shot and Bumblebee is there with the bots. So, yeah, we don't have that whole thing. And then Optimus says once they steal back the power source, that there's something he must do. And Cliff already knows. He wants to go and fight Megatron, and he gears up his guns, ready to accompany Optimus. But Optimus tells him with an immediate no, with utter sternness. They just lost Ratchet. And it was a heavy blow to not only the bots, but him too. He will not endanger another bot, especially since Cliff, he doesn't hold this against him, but Cliff has been on not only Starscream's radar, but the cons. That would just make him an even heavier target. He will not lose another bot today. He will end Megatron personally, and then they will deal with Starscream at a later date. And this time, they'll deal with him proper. And he means this. Cliff, although he really wants to make up for what he pretty much did, him and Prime both for letting Starscream in, he agrees because he was loyal to Optimus. With this, we get the Optimus versus Megatron fight 2 at the volcano where Unicron is erupted and brought to life again. How will this fight go? Will Prime actually kill Megatron? How will Unicron's thing go? Who will get the key to Vector Sigma? And what will happen with Starscream and the clones later on, especially with Synthetic Energon? And if they manage to make it past Unicron and the rest, what's left for the bots?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Are you ready for adventure, for danger, for death?
Can you repeat the question?
Just get on with it!
Welcome, everyone, to the Omniverse of Nick, and Part 6, to What If Cliffjumper Survived. But before we get into this episode, be sure, as always, to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, because as you can see, we got more perks and more add-ons to the ever-growing channel of the Omniverse of Nick. So you do not want to miss anything that comes this way, story-wise and so on. So once you do those two things, we can head right on into this episode of Cliff's story. Last time we left off, Optimus and Megatron were in their second battle at the volcano where Unicron is bound to erupt and awaken. But everything changes from canon in this fight when Optimus blinds Megatron like he did and starts taking the advantage. Once he does that, and Megatron catches his blade and the Dark Energon and his own combat strategies empower him, Optimus doesn't get his blade broken or get caught off guard. Ratchet's death has made him just like, if not near, his live-action self, where he is now more consumed by rage and more bound to kill Megatron, especially here. So once Megatron catches the blade, Optimus just switches it to a blaster and then shoots Megatron repeatedly in the face, blinding him again even worse. But the Dark Energon continues to empower Megatron, and this helps him along with his own combat strategies and Optimus falling to the level of Dark Energon being exposed to him, and eventually Megatron takes the battle to him. But Bulk, Cliffjumper, and the rest of the bots manage to save Optimus, and Megatron, even if the Dark Energon empowered him, he still did take a lot more damage than in canon because of Optimus's bloodlust. But anyways, they recover, and Unicron eventually awakens. With the bots, all of it going up to canon until giant Unicron comes into the surface. And Cliff is there to see, like, hey, we're about to fight a giant god, pretty much. And that's just a small thing with Cliff involvement with that fight. But then Megatron saves them, or more specifically, Optimus. And Optimus isn't so much like wanting the help, especially after what happened. And Megatron's even more skeptical to say what he's about to say, since he was much more closer to dying than he was in canon. But he still offers his alliance with the bots to go against Unicron. But Cliff, along with everyone else, is instantly against it because of their recent loss with Ratchet and what just happened and everything. Optimus especially with his involvement, and even if it wasn't Megatron. And he doesn't say this specifically, but he tells Megatron that there's no way any of them will trust Megatron. Megatron is like, he understands, but he feels like the bots are hiding something specifically. And one of those energy readings that the cons had picked up, he asks about this and why it's like this. And Megatron then hears the story. And Megatron says, well, he doesn't care any about the death of the bot Ratchet. He does know that he was a fond friend of Optimus back in his days of being Orion Pax, or his old self, or old friend, whatever Megatron would say. And says more specifically, they need to work together to take down Unicron. After that, he doesn't care what happens. And so, the bots go back to base while Megatron stalls Unicron. At the base, Optimus tells the bots and Fowler that even though it's very against his judgment, he really doesn't want to do it, and he really doesn't want to trust Megatron, and he really was hoping that he had terminated him at the volcano. Megatron's right. For one thing, Megatron wasn't involved with Ratchet's death. Starscream was a subordinate, but even he stirred away from Megatron, and he's not there. And they need his help to take down Unicron. So, they have to go along with Megatron, even if it's against all their judgment. Then, Optimus sees Cliff in the corner after some time of talking with the bots. Optimus goes over, and he says he needs to speak with him. Cliff, he's a bit surprised by this, because him and Optimus, they don't really have any conversations. And him going to him directly? I mean, Cliff is one of Optimus's best warriors and everything, but this is just really suspicious. But then Optimus hands him something and says, Cliff, you know what this is. The key to Vector Sigma. Because, I'll mention more on it in a minute, Optimus says he's giving this to him because not only has Cliff showed how loyal and fierce he is to being one of the best Autobots on their team, but they owe him a lot for keeping Starscream at bay and keeping the team in line and himself, especially since Ratchet died. And he feels that not only is this a great, important device to give and entrust to him, but it's also a memoir to Ratchet and everyone they've lost. And it's right that Cliffjumper has it. So, Cliffjumper is officially given the key to Vector Sigma, in which I'll mention more on in a minute why Optimus said to Cliff, you know what it is. Megatron is sent to the base, which is the new one, by the way, because of the scraplets. They go to Unicron's core, fight off the antibodies with Cliff's help. But ultimately, as canon, Optimus expels the Matrix into Unicron's spark, putting him in stasis, and turning to Orion Pax with Megatron by his side. Cliff goes to try and get Optimus back and combat Megatron, but Megatron just shoots him away and just like shooing him away. Shoot, or shoot, it really doesn't matter. That's weird to say. Bumblebee, Bulk, and RC try to fight Megatron while Orion, Optimus, is about to go into the portal, the ground bridge. But Cliff, he goes to try and get Optimus, but Megatron, he just unsheaths his blade and cuts off one of Cliff's tires attached to his arm, and now Cliff has to literally tend to his wound, and they all return to base. Fowler wants to know what happens when he bridges them back, and where's Optimus? But RC, Bulkhead, and Bumblebee, they just are like, they don't know. He didn't recognize any of them, didn't know his own name, and Cliff even tried the most to get him back. And they couldn't. He just left with Megatron. But Cliff says maybe the reason why he didn't know who they were is because he reverted back to his old self. Fowler and the bots want to know immediately how Cliff could insinuate this or how he knows this. Then Cliff demonstrates them all with something very surprising. The key to Vector Sigma entrusted by Optimus, and also the backstory of Megatron and Optimus, and Ratchet's involvement with it also. Now, I know what all of you Transformers Prime fans and everything are thinking. How, what, and why would Cliff know about Orion Pax? Well, you see, Ratchet and several others were around Orion Pax, including Transformers Prime. But in the original G1 and other Transformers shows and mangas, it showed that not only were Ratchet, Megatron, and several others around Optimus when he was Orion, but Cliff was too. So I merely took the liberties of incorporating that into the fact that Cliff would know and have been around Orion in this time too. So consider it creative liberties, and the fact that we never knew about it, so we're allowed even more creative liberties. And Cliff said that he was entrusted this to bring back Optimus. And if they can't get him back from the Khan's warship, they need to find a way to access this on Cybertron and get Optimus to the way he was before. RC is really proud of her partner, and not knowing about this, sure, she's mad at him a little bit, but this is great. They can not only bring back Optimus, but Cliff's like an honorary Prime, and he knew about who Optimus was back then. And it's sad that Ratchet couldn't be here. He would be really proud too. But Fowler says getting Prime back is going to be not a walk in the park, and they gotta wait and just see what happens, especially with Starscream on the loose as well. So for now, they just wait. Meanwhile, Orion, Optimus, is on Megatron's ship, convinced that it's Megatronus and, being a Decepticon. Meanwhile, Starscream is finally ready to take action after Unicron is sealed and hearing and seeing and reading about what happened. What will him and his clones do with synthetic energon? How will this impact the bots and Khans? And how will Cliff get Optimus to the way he was with him being entrusted the key to Vector Sigma? And how will that impact the rest of the story with Cliff being an honorary Prime?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Anyway, seriously, get out now. Get out. go.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 7 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, like always, before we get into today's episode, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you don't miss anything that is going to come the way of this channel, and just generally support it in all of its entirety for future old stories, all that. And to have your stories possibly become a reality on the channel. Once you guys get all that out of the way, we will resume the Cliffjumper story today with part 7. Now, in the last episode, we covered Starscream finally taking action after Unicron was sealed with the Matrix and Orion and all that. Starscream's finally ready to act with the synthetic energon and his clones. Much earlier, because of killing Ratchet and all that. Spoiler alert for those who didn't watch, more or less. But anyways, while Unicron's whole thing was going on, one of the clones Starscream actually had to kill. Not only because of the treachery, because that was a thing, but because of the synthetic energon side effects, which Starscream should have expected and now knows that the formula wasn't completed. And were it to be, this probably wouldn't have happened, even though it's Starscream, he's traitorous. But this just gives him more of a motivator, if anything, to succeed with the other clones he has, and just to work better with the synth-en that he has to work with, and to make better that he can. And he still goes to formalize a plan while he's doing all this to get revenge on the bots and cons. Him and one of the clones will try to find the Autobots, and the other 2 clones will find the warship to equalize the revenge. At the warship, the 2 clones enter. Not noticed yet, one of the clones reaches the room with Orion Pax in it, and yeah, it's the same as the original Starscream and Orion's conversation, except with the clone, it's different, sort of, mildly different. And the synth-en, even though Starscream knows how to better operate with it, doesn't mean that it's fully going to work, especially with the clones, even if it's better even before Ratchet got killed. And you guys more or less get what I mean. The other clone slices and dices any con in his way while also trying to remain discreet and out of the way of anyone. But that doesn't help him for long with killing some of the cons, and eventually Megatron and Soundwave are right in front of him, right near the control room, with Arachnid right behind Starscream, and just shaking her head, smiling evilly, and preparing herself to fight, because even before Starscream shot a rocket at her and the whole Insecticon deal in canon, they still had kind of a rivalry going. So Arachnid prepares to fight this clone, not knowing it's a clone. But Megatron says he'll deal with Starscream personally, for worry of Orion Pax seeing all this and all that, not knowing the other clones with him. And he just shoots this clone and just kills him, with little problem, except the synth-en helps to at least fight off the blast for a moment. So, all he has going for him. But the other clone hears the shooting and hears cons coming down the lane towards him. He tries to run like the normal Starscream at this time, but gets shot down and killed. Meanwhile, the real Starscream and the second clone with him, the other clone, the only other one, are trying to find the Autobots, but to no avail. So, eventually, Starscream just says, if they just keep on looking like this, they're never going to find the Autobots. They moved bases and they had an idea, or at least he did, but unlike the warship, they could be anywhere. I mean, the warship's the same, but with the Autobots, it's much harder. So Starscream tells the clone that he's got a better plan. with the comlinks and better radio chatter with his clones, he was able to hear and feel, obviously, the deaths and what was happening, especially with Orion, Optimus, whatever. So now Starscream, even if he wasn't there, he still knows what happened. And he can use this all to get an advantage, lure the bots to him, not needing a medical kit, and then sneak up on them and get them that way. It's convoluted, but he thinks that it will work. RC still invades the ship and gets ground bridged by Soundwave. Bulkhead gets very angry because there's no Ratchet or Optimus and it's just Bulkhead. Now Cliff knows that since they tried to get Optimus back and it didn't work, that they really do have to go through with going to Cybertron first, because this didn't work and they just all stew over this fact. But soon enough, Cliffjumper and RC get a high-frequency signal with an embedded message, and Cliffjumper reads it, and it's from Starscream. RC, immediately after hearing this, tells Cliff to avoid any notion of talking with Starscream, especially when she brings up Ratchet and the fact that Optimus is their concern. Starscream? They should, if anything, just track him down and kill him. But she doesn't even care enough to want to do that. But she also does at the same time. It's very mixed emotion, especially with Ratchet's passing. But Cliff says even with that, him and Optimus, they have a responsibility towards Starscream after what happened. Especially him. So hearing him out, taking him down, it doesn't matter. They gotta do this. At least in his mind, that's how he feels. And he reads the message, and it says that Starscream knows about information about their leader, and he has a prize and knowledge for them if they both come alone. And when they do, Cliffjumper and RC immediately targets Starscream with both her blasters straight in his face, because she ain't playing. Even if it wasn't Cliffjumper, she still ain't exactly gonna be all uppity with Starscream. And Cliffjumper's the next to raise his blaster, slowly, and says Starscream, he better get to the point quick, because he ain't got too much more patience than RC. But Starscream, with his Synthen, just smiles, and Cliff and RC can see the Synthen eyes and everything, and this just makes RC even more angry, and says that he better start talking or whatever the prize or whatever before she just decides to go in all blasting, because she's really about to. But Starscream finally speaks and says that he does have knowledge, and he did mention a prize. But, and then he snaps his fingers, and the clone, the only other clone that was with him, comes out right behind them, and now both of them, with the Synthen, aim their rockets directly at Cliff and RC. And the real Starscream just says, if you want the information and what I promised to give you, you're gonna have to get through me and my clone here first. And now it's an all-out fight. Cliff and RC versus Starscream and his other clone with the Synthen. And at first, the battle seems even, but Starscream and his clone, especially with the Synthen, this throws Cliff and RC off guard for a time. It surprises them because they should have expected this and didn't with the clone. And Starscream just feels a sense of like, I will finally get my hands on Cliff, especially his partner. But soon enough, Cliff and RC begin to take the fight seriously. The rage over Ratchet, their partnership, and just their unwavering resolve to take Starscream down now kicks in. And they actually manage to get Starscream on the ground and kill the clone. So no more clones, and Starscream's now on the ground. But it didn't come without a cost. RC and Cliff, they're injured. Not like gravely, but they are injured to the point where they can barely put up a fight, and they've almost exhausted everything they have. But Starscream, he still has the Synthen effect, and he stands up. He's injured too, just not as badly, because the clone more or less did half the fighting for him. And now he comes towards them and says, "You were supposed to finish me to get what you want." He raises his arm, preparing to strike them, and both the bot's partners close their eyes, preparing to die. But they open their eyes. Nothing's happened. They're still alive. And they're both surprised by this. But Starscream just smiles at them, saying that, for one, they put up enough of a fight that he won't terminate them, and consider it an even package for letting him in, even if it came at a cost of their friend, which he doesn't bring up too much as to not stir them and have to kill them. And says that he did promise to give them information and everything, and he ain't got too much fight left in him, even if it doesn't look like it. And he offers to share what he knows, and says about his clones going to the Khan's warship, and that he had stationed both parties to go find them and the Khans, but they weren't expecting Optimus, and they were on the ship. So he tells him about Orion Pax and all that, but RC, she just cuts in right near the end of the story, surprised to hear all this, but then angry again, saying they already know about Optimus. But Starscream, this takes him by surprise, like canon, and Cliff is now getting frustrated, feeling more fight in him, and saying that unless you know where Megatron's space bridge is, then this was all just a ploy to get us here so you could kill us. You might as well just get it over with right now, and I bet you the prize was just our passing. But this catches Starscream's attention like canon about the space bridge, and now he tells them what they know, what he knows about the space bridge, and he did promise to give them something in return, along with this info, and presents a small container with synthen for the both of them to share, and saying that this will help them get their leader back, and consider it a small sorrow memoir to their old friend Ratchet, which angers and relieves RC and Cliff. It would be a very weird moment. Meanwhile, Orion is slowly getting suspicious of Megatron. Bulkhead and Bumblebee, along with Agent Fowler, being the new Ratchet, all guard the space bridge and take it over. And with Cliff holding the key to Vector Sigma to revive Optimus to the way he was, RC, of course, goes with him, and both of them have just a small portion of synthetic energon to help them with their speed and just to make the journey go. Once they get to the place where they go to get the key to Vector Sigma in, right at Kaon, they are attacked by the Insecticon. But RC is able to hold her own much more sufficiently with the synthen guiding her. Cliff is ready to help because with both of them, especially even with this small portion of synthen, they can take this Insecticon down. But Fowler just radio chats to Cliff saying, no, RC can handle this, especially with that little bit of synthen. It's not both of your jobs to worry about that. It's your job to get Optimus back, or he would say Prime, because that was Fowler's main way of saying Optimus's name. RC even tells Cliff, that she has got this, and that Optimus comes first. And through a lot of convincing and dodging the Insecticon, Cliff says very reluctantly he's going to go, but he expects to see his partner in one piece and not end up like Ratchet. And RC promises. And Cliff just books it straight into the tunnel. And with RC and her synthen, she's able to give the Insecticon a run for its money. But she isn't able to take it down. And eventually, it starts to overpower her slowly but surely, her exuding quite a bit of force and still putting up a great fight in the end much better than she did. Meanwhile, Cliff eventually reaches the place to put in the key to Vector Sigma and revive the Matrix. But scraplets begin to circulate around the ceiling right at the entranceway, and this is bad news. Especially if you guys watched the second part and know what happened to the old Autobot base. Yeah, with Cliff here and not Jack, even he knows that with scraplets, he could die here, but he right away comes up with a plan, and with the Synthen guiding him, he books it at the fastest speed he can go right out of the entranceway, with the scraplets following in hot pursuit. And Vector Sigma and the Matrix are reviving without the scraplets biting onto it. The Insecticon, who finally got RC off its tail, is into the tunnel, and it's right in the middle of the tunnel where Cliff sees the Insecticon finding him and knows that with scraplets behind him and the Insecticon in front, he can't afford to stop. So he quickly gets out of vehicle mode, shoots at the Insecticon, jumps over it, and goes straight back into vehicle mode. And the Insecticon staggers, but then follows right behind Cliff. And the scraplets follow right behind the Insecticon. So it's like a full-on race for their lives. All of them, even though the scraplets aren't really fighting for anything. You guys get the point. RC begins to go in the tunnel, waking up, and she sees Cliff just booking it out of there without the Matrix, and Cliff's just screaming at her, "Go now!" at the top of his lungs, or robotic lungs, or whatever, and it's just telling her to go, and both of them just go straight into vehicle mode, drive at the fastest that they can go, with the Synthen definitely helping, even if it's a bit, with their speed. Soon enough, they're out of the tunnel, and they see the Insecticon almost out, coming straight towards them. And with everything they've got, they fire every single blasting shot that they can with Cliff's word, and it's a very reminiscent moment to when they fought Shockwave, and this actually gives the Insecticon major damage towards its front, but it does not kill him, or it, but it does slow him down enough so that scraplets swarm and devour the Insecticon, which was Cliff's entire point, literally split-second thing. And with this, they go into the tunnel at the fastest speed that they can go, grab the Matrix, and then they have to swerve around. Even if the scraplets had devoured the Insecticon by then, they are able with the Synthen to barely avoid them and get to the space bridge. It's very narrow and very stressful for Cliff and RC. Meanwhile, Orion has fully gotten onto Megatron, and Megatron has found the space bridge and goes to confront the Autobots. And Fowler being there, Megatron just has to kick him out of the way, pretty much, and everything. But Bulkhead and Bumblebee, they face Megatron, but without Ratchet, which would be the same fight, except there wouldn't be a few extra blows dealt to Megatron in that sense. Orion escapes the cons, finds the space bridge, barely puts up a fight against Megatron, and then RC, she comes booking it out of the space bridge and confronts Megatron, giving a tiny bit more of a fight, but still nothing in terms to Megatron. And Orion turns, and Cliff is there with the revived Matrix of Leadership, and restores Optimus to the way he was. And with this, Optimus just mercilessly, like he did, but even more so, just pounds on Megatron, and all the bots go back to the base. After this, Cliff is very happy to see Optimus back, especially knowing that he had succeeded, but just barely, and they were able to do it. And Optimus, after hearing about all of what's happened, he looks at Cliffjumper a much different way now, and says that Cliff has truly earned the title of Warrior in Team Prime, and Ratchet would be very proud. What will happen now? With Cliffjumper being like pretty much the second in terms to Optimus besides Ultra Magnus, what will happen with the story now going further and with Starscream?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Hello, everybody! Sit down, shut up, and maybe you'll learn something.
Hey guys, welcome to the Omniverse of Nick and part 8 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, like always, before we get into today's episode, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me grow up this channel, get more awesome stories pumping out, and you don't miss anything to come to this channel in the future alongside your own what if stories and reviews and discussions that may come to pass. After you guys do all that stuff, we shall get into the next part of Cliffjumper's tale. Now, in the last episode, Optimus is back thanks to Cliffjumper and RC through quick wits and thinking and bravery. Optimus officially pronounces Cliffjumper as his second in command, not knowing if Ultra Magnus is out there or anything, but he holds Cliff now in the highest of honor for what he's done, pretty much. After that, it goes kind of the same for a minute. The spark extractor is still retrieved, bounced around, and that episode plays out the same. And then we get to the episode where Silas kidnaps Bumblebee, or knocks him out and steals his T-Cog, and Starscream meeting Silas. Except, this time, whenever Starscream meets with Silas, it's not just Energon and T-Cogs that Starscream presents to the table with Silas. He presents synthetic Energon. Now, he does say while he is nearing the end of his synthetic route, he wishes to present it to Mech and Silas as a tribute to him teaming up with Silas. And he says the effects that it has, but the great effects that it can have if they use it the right way and forward it with T-Cogs and bio knowledge and all that. Pretty much his whole spiel, except with Synthen involved. And this actually makes Silas hold Starscream just a teensy little bit more as an ally, because before he didn't give a frick about Starscream. Meanwhile, Bumblebee chases Knockout, who still gets his shield, and then we get to the entrance of the Forge of Solus Prime, which Bulkhead gets blasted in the back by Megatron and it's still stolen. Then we get to the scene where Starscream would originally threaten blowing up Bumblebee's T-Cog and then ending up shooting it anyway, but a more Synthen look on him with this deviation. But just before he's about to shoot it or Bumblebee's about to react, he gets knocked down to the ground with the T-Cog dropping undamaged. Starscream, Synthen, looks angrily at who did this. It was Cliffjumper. He has come by himself at this point to rescue him instead of Ratchet or anyone else coming right away. He sees this and has heard about it as the perfect way to really lay into Starscream. Cliffjumper is fueled with fire after so long of failing to get rid of Starscream, and all he's done, no matter if he's helped out or not, he just wants it over. And even with Synthen, Cliff is able to hold his own, because now with a new sense in Team Prime, Cliff is much better of a combatant and knowing how Starscream operates. And he holds out just long enough before Starscream can get an advantage to where Starscream, he runs out of Synthen finally. And his eyes go back to red. And Starscream, after noticing this and Cliffjumper taunting him pretty much, possibly not even noticing, Starscream knows that he is now very vulnerable. And Cliff, he could very well beat him. And with the T-Cog now there, but two bots blocking him, he just tells Cliff and B, but mainly Cliff, that this is far from over, and that day will come whenever he finally extinguishes Cliffjumper's spark. And with that, he launches a rocket at both of them and just flees the scene. But the T-Cog is remained unharmed when Starscream is approached by Silas and Mech, tased, and then his T-Cog is taken, like canon. Bumblebee's T-Cog unharmed means that without Ratchet, it's still okay because he could still use his T-Cog. He could just put it back. And after that, we get the debut, once again, of Wheeljack, but the full debut of Dreadwing. And the entrance to that playing out the same, except Cliffjumper is there to hear about Dreadwing fully, possibly could know who he is, and hearing about the death of Sea Spray, and which would probably hit Cliff hard. I feel like he would know Sea Spray more than Dreadwing. But the episode overall plays out the exact same, except Wheeljack would hear about Ratchet's death by Starscream, which he would kind of be upset about. Kind of hard to know how Wheeljack would feel at this point without, like, not really going on missions with Ratchet too much, but I imagine he'd be still upset. We then get the episode of Arachnid betraying the Decepticons, with Dreadwing and Breakdown out on the mission, and Breakdown still getting his butt killed. After that, Starscream getting encountered in the mines with the Insecticon and Arachnid. Cliffjumper and RC get another signal with an embedded message with an injured Starscream. Once Starscream brings up his whole excuse that he used in that episode, RC and Cliffjumper are even more on him than the first time, and at this point they're just done with Starscream, especially Cliffjumper. And they mentioned Bumblebee's T-Cog and Ratchet's death and everything, and just to prove how much they don't care, RC just aims her blaster, just instantly ready to kill Starscream. But Starscream then mentions the fact that he doesn't have a T-Cog anymore, and maybe this is some kind of revenge that he honestly has already been put in a position he can't do anything anymore. He doesn't have a T-Cog, and his Synthen's out, so isn't that enough? And he's really not a threat. And this actually makes Cliffjumper laugh, because if he didn't know before, this actually proves that no, Starscream really isn't a threat, and they just go about their business. After that, Megatron encounters the Insecticon in the mines, while Arachnid and RC have their scuffle, and Arachnid traps RC. But just before she's about to strike RC, Cliffjumper comes in guns blazing, and that's right at the same time that Starscream launches his rocket that he did. And this, with both of these attacks at the same time, neither knowing of each other being in the same area, this actually gravely injures Arachnid. And she was already injured prior. And when Starscream shoots the second rocket sliding down the mountain, this injures Arachnid to the point that she can't move. Like, she is literally stuck in place. She can't drill. She can't fly away. She is stuck there at the mercy of Scream and Cliffjumper, who, when they notice each other, aim their blasters and are ready to attack each other. And Starscream is just exasperated at this point, continuously running into Cliffjumper and the Autobots and having troubles, and it's just going on. And he mentions his T-Cog and everything, and that he's really not a threat. Why is he still being targeted? But Cliffjumper, obviously now seeing this, knows that really Starscream just played them all. And Optimus already said it before he went to go help RC. And he just prepares his blaster, once again fueled by the resolve, to terminate Starscream, remembering Ratchet and just the fact that Starscream's been after him since day one. But this distraction allows Arachnid to get enough strength to drill right behind Starscream's back. And honestly, Starscream really doesn't care, because he just sets his sights on the Autobots, particularly RC, who's still webbed up. Cliffjumper aims his blasters and says that if you even think of touching RC, there won't even be a spark left of you when I'm done. And he holds firm to this. Starscream just ignores it, aims his claws right at RC, but like before they went to save Optimus and get his memory back, he just claws her down and just walks away, considering them even on multiple accounts. Because at this point, RC, Cliff, and Starscream have spared each other on like 4 different occasions. And the Autobots and just everyone just go about their business, literally. We then get the debut of Nemesis Prime, Silas, and all that, and that episode plays out the exact same way, except Cliffjumper is there to fight the Nemesis Prime, but he's not able to do anything like Bumblebee and RC and Bulkhead. But yeah, he's just there as an extra backup. And Silas gets crushed under the rubble, severely injured, but soon to be alive, as we know. Fowler gets interviewed, and that episode plays out straight after. Bulkhead still gets stuck on the Nemesis during the mission, except one big thing here. One big thing. Bulkhead is not going to run into the Starscream clone, because the clones were brought up sooner, before this whole ordeal happened, way before. Starscream is just chilling at the Harbinger, just waiting out his next move, basically. So, that's one less threat that the bots or the cons have to deal with, even though the bots didn't really deal with the clones in canon, they did in the story. But you guys get my point. But that doesn't stop Arachnid from unleashing her Insecticon horde, which does still happen. And Cliff is there to help out RC and everyone else take out, or at least try to take out a good amount of Insecticons and chase Arachnid into the hive where all the Insecticon stasis pods and all that stuff is. And since she was so gravely injured not too long ago, they are actually able to literally outmaneuver her straight away. And RC, she just goes straight up to Arachnid and kicks her, with Cliffjumper blasting her into the stasis pod, with Bulkhead in the end attacking the main part of the warship, and that whole Dark Energon episode starting to play out like it did in canon. But Cliffjumper and RC, through quick wits, small synth knowledge, and just maybe even a little bit of it left, and just their partnership growing at a point where such things are like barely a threat to them, are able to escape stasis. But now, they don't know what to do. They're the only ones who are not in stasis. But Fowler is still with them, the only human, and he opts to go with them, or even on his own, to the warship and get back Megatron and like the warship, you know, that whole plan that Jack, Miko, and Raphael did. And they succeed, with Cliffjumper and RC being in stasis at the warship, but Fowler able to actually get the deed done, and all of them are taken out. But when Knockout begins to regain consciousness, Cliff, instead of Ratchet, shoots at him, and that whole thing plays out. And after that, we then get to relics, more of them, with Knockout and the Insecticon encountering RC and Cliff instead of RC and B. And then we get Dreadwing and Optimus's encounter in the Arctic, and Optimus being able to snow in Dreadwing with the avalanche and apprehend Starscream. And when they're waiting for Fowler to get all the humans out of where the relic is, and Starscream's basically like taunting humans and talking this, that, and the other thing, Optimus is even more angry and actually hits Starscream a few times for the death of Ratchet. And no matter what he's done or how many times he's spared Cliff and RC, that is inexcusable in his case. And it's even more so from when Cliff died. But Starscream still gets his hands on the Apex armor, and forcing Optimus and Dreadwing to team up and force Starscream into the water of the Arctic, with Dreadwing still deciding not to join Team Prime, even if Optimus was less inclined to do so just because of what he's dealt with, a much different Optimus. But now, we get to something major. Wheeljack and Ratchet's eventual encounter with Soundwave, but there's no Ratchet. Who will go with Wheeljack? How will more encounters with Starscream go? Will it end good, or will it end even worse?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Get the frick out!
Let's try that again!
Hey everyone, welcome to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 9 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. This will be a short one, but with a very big twist. But before we get into that, disclaimer, because this is the shortest video I've done in a while, be sure, as always, to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, so that way you can help me grow up this channel, get more awesome stories pumping out, maybe even see your own stories come to life on the channel, and just generally help out the channel. With all that out of the way, let's get into this episode that is short, but with a deadly twist. Now, we begin off where we left off with who will go with Wheeljack on the whole mission, Soundwave, the Ion Blaster, that whole thing, since Ratchet's dead. Well, Cliffjumper. I mean, it should have been obvious from the preview, but hey, gotta make a little bit of suspense, don't we? Anyways, Cliff is going with the likes of Wheeljack on the mission to get the Ion Blaster, and soon enough, Laserbeak and Soundwave are on their tail, and that whole chase scene, besides Cliff being very on board with targeting Laserbeak, happens the same way as it did. But this time, with Cliff around, they go through with the initial plan of blowing Laserbeak up like big, instead of Ratchet's plan. So, when Soundwave gets Laserbeak back, with no Autobot fight, goes back to the ship, and Knockout is about to study him, the bomb explodes. And at that moment, almost that entire point of the ship, a good range of it, is caught in flame and wreckage, and Soundwave is blown to Kingdom Come. Soundwave has been terminated. Megatron is furious at this, and rightfully so. He just lost his surveillance chief in the most just out there way, and it's not even, they've only taken out one Autobot, and that was a while back, and everything just seems to be going wrong. They might have one less Autobot to worry about, but that was just the medic, and it doesn't seem to be slowing the Autobots down. This is just literally putting it in full circle for Megatron, that the Autobots are much more of a threat, especially now that their medic has died. It's literally fueled them. And now Megatron knows, now more than ever before, he's got to put his forces beyond work to get the relics and come out on top. We then get Hardshell's debut, and his fight with Bulkhead pretty much goes as you would expect, with Wheeljack out for blood against the Insecticon leader. And Megatron is even more furious and literally actually attacks Hardshell to prove his point that he wants one of their sparks, and he means it. But then he looks over after he rages on Hardshell, and his whole mood changes. What he sees is actually corrected his mind enough from what just happened with Soundwave to put him on a whole new mood but still be stern with Hardshell. The whole fight with Hardshell and Wheeljack goes exactly the same, except no Miko. So, Wheeljack is literally left to fight Hardshell alone, and is almost at the mercy of the Insecticon leader. And he's just about to finish off Wheeljack before he is knocked to the ground, and very much so injured at this attack from Cliff and RC. And Wheeljack now gets up, and now Hardshell is completely outmanned and outnumbered. He doesn't know why they came here to help. He was wanting to do this alone, even if he died for it. But RC just prepares herself with Cliff and says, they lost Ratchet, Tailgate, and so many others. They're not losing another, especially after almost losing Bulkhead. Cliff touches upon this, saying that they've lost enough. They work together, and that's just how it is. He says this with the whole saving Prime and his memory thing and Ratchet. They just testify upon this further. But Hardshell just smirks, or what would look like a smirk on an Insecticon, before a blast rings out from a certain relic, the Ion Blaster. The blaster from whoever shot it goes right at RC and knocks her to the ground, and then at Cliff, who he is able to dodge the first blast, but then is hit by the second. But he is up more than RC enough to see who shot the blast. It's Soundwave. But what? How is that remotely possible? How is it that Soundwave was able to survive that? And is that what Megatron was so up about? And this is not the Soundwave that left that wreckage. Soundwave actually speaks and says, you should have made sure that I was terminated. But how is he alive? How was he able to survive that explosion? What happened in that brief interlude between going with Hardshell and everything to combat Wheeljack? What could have happened in that time? And how will they defeat the seemingly immortal Soundwave?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
I'm back! I don't want to scare you! Who's ready for some excitement?
We are!
Who's ready for some fun?
We are!
Who's ready to shut up and watch the episode?
No, thank you. No one asked you. It doesn't matter what you think. Roll film.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick and part 10 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, like always, before we get into today's episode, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me grow up this channel, get more awesome stories pumping out, even see your stories come on into the future, and just generally help out the cause. With all that out of the way, we can begin the next part to Cliffjumper's tale. Leaving off from last time, we have probably the most shocking thing besides Ratchet's death in this story. Soundwave, seemingly out of nowhere, has come back. And he can talk and says that they really should have made sure he was terminated. And obviously, everyone, Wheeljack, Cliff, and RC, are very shocked at this revelation and completely sidestep the fact that Hardshell and all the Insecticons are there too. But Wheeljack, he's gained his strength back by now. Three of them get into a ship, they get on, and they prepare to fire missiles. Soundwave beelines it out of there, leaving Hardshell to get utterly, completely vaporized. As for the Insecticons that would follow, Wheeljack pretty much admits his original plan, just with the help of Cliff and RC, with a little more firepower. Once they get back to the base, Optimus wants to know what exactly happened. He knows that Wheeljack obviously couldn't be stopped from going out and trying to avenge Bulkhead even if he wasn't terminated, but something obviously besides that happened, especially since they're all injured. And Wheeljack simply says Soundwave isn't dead. He doesn't know why, how, or how it's remotely possible, but just whenever he was about to get killed by the Insecticon, Cliff and RC saved him. It seemed like it was all right, but then Soundwave just... Everyone's emotional right now. Wheeljack, Cliff, RC, they can't process how this has happened. Neither can Optimus, and this actually gets to him a little. Doesn't scare him or anything, but he does say that it's with very much concern that Soundwave is still around, which proves, somehow, someway, no matter if he survived or not, the Decepticons and Megatron are not giving up this fight anytime soon. They may have lost their forces, some of them, and, you know, more or less the same with the Autobots, except the Autobots are a bit more on leverage, but they ain't giving up anytime soon, especially since he knows Megatron. But he does lambast Wheeljack just a little bit for putting himself in that situation, even if he did do good by thinking he killed Soundwave, which Wheeljack can agree to with the standpoint, but with Cliff and RC and everything like that, it's not too much of a ridicule from Optimus, since he's just as equally baffled. Meanwhile, I know that every single one of you that is going to be commenting is going to be asking me, how, why, just how? How is Soundwave still alive? Because that plan, in canon, could have killed him, and this definitely should have killed him. Well, here's the big reveal. The explosion did, in fact, kill Soundwave. But beforehand, and before he even went out to find the Ion Blaster, they had actually found a use for Makeshift. Finally, after all this time, Makeshift, Soundwave, pretty much kind of being a surveillance chief, knew that something would happen, or at least before the bomb fully went off inside the ship, he knew that something was going to happen. It really doesn't matter when, but he knew. So, he integrated a backup installment of himself into Makeshift. So, it's not Wheeljack Makeshift, it's Soundwave Makeshift. Pretty much a backup carbon copy integrated into another Decepticon, which Makeshift is perfect for. And this is why Megatron was smiling in the last episode, because even though Soundwave died, he basically didn't. Because with Makeshift, he can do almost pretty much everything Soundwave did. And that's how we have this Soundwave, which is not actually Soundwave. There you go. Finally found a use for Makeshift. Anyways, after all that exposition, we don't get, obviously, the scene or episode with RC and Miko, because 1, they're at a different base, 2, Cliff's alive, 3, there's no kids, and 4, there'd be no reason to have this episode kind of thing in the first place. So, that doesn't happen. And Megatron, on one hand, he's angry that the Insecticon leader is dead, along with a large army of Insecticons, and no bot besides the medic has been killed so far on their journey to Earth. But, on the plus side, Makeshift, being Soundwave pretty much integrated, is making much better progress with having the data of Soundwave and everything than he did with Wheeljack. Then again, besides the blades and the shooting, there isn't too much of Wheeljack to explore. Well, Makeshift could have definitely used better with the bombs, but that would make for a review video. But anyways, both the Soundwave, he's doing even much better with actual time to get used to it. Think of Makeshift as like a Zamasu or Ginyu of sorts, which definitely keeps Megatron in a good mood. Anyways, we then get the debut of Smokescreen And pretty much his whole entrance playing out the exact same way, him thinking he's great for destiny and this, that, and the other thing about Smokescreen's introduction, because really, there'd be nothing to sway that little point of the story, except Team Prime would be almost the same exact way, except maybe a little bit more relaxed with Smokescreen, because Cliff is alive, even though Ratchet's dead, which I think would help RC, not lambasting him, but ultimately I think it would be the exact same nevertheless, except Cliff would probably provide some stability even if Ratchet weren't there. Anyways, Smokescreen, once again, his whole entrance thing plays out the exact same way so far. Then we get to the scene of the Red Energon and Starscream, and the only difference that part is that Cliff is there to stop Starscream from climbing the tower, and he pretty much is the one to hold off Starscream while the Autobots are on the tower. But his shots, of course, do nothing to Starscream, but they distract him long enough for Smokescreen to come out of nowhere and kick Starscream out of the Apex armor with the phase shifter. So he doesn't even get to properly introduce himself. He does after, though, making a very snarky remark at Starscream's lack of keeping on his guard. But Starscream retorts by blowing the cage with the Red Energon and fleeing. So, yeah, call it a retort among a retort, if you will. Then we get the debut of Silas in Breakdown's body. And this is where things are going to drastically change. Fowler says to everybody about this whole development as he did in canon, but there is no human besides him, no kids, to do the whole go to Raphael's house and, disable Project Damocles. So, Fowler would be left to do it on his own, but it's not enough. It's literally one man, and the way to do it would be so much more complex with just Fowler. So Project Damocles and everything going on, it ultimately means that Project Damocles stays functioning, which Optimus pretty much tells his Autobots they need to retreat because it becomes so fierce they can't fight back, so they literally have to retreat. Once back to the base, Optimus is now dead sure beyond anything, with this especially seeming that Silas is on board with the Decepticons means that now Megatron's gonna even be more on the level of not giving up anytime soon. This pretty much just confirms that they might still have great numbers and they've only lost Ratchet, which is still a very high cost. They're still in this, and they still need to do about this smartly, otherwise they would have ended up just being fried. Bulkhead says that they can still do this, they just need to take out Project Damocles and it will be so much easier, especially since Silas, Breakdown, he really wants to get into gear. He felt like he had Silas, it's just Project Damocles too much. And even he knows that, and knows that even if they did that, the cons would still be rough, especially with Soundwave seemingly still alive. They don't know the development of Makeshift yet. And Optimus acknowledges this and says that if they're going to do this, they have to do this a smart way and wait, and then come up with a plan. They're still going about the relics and everything and all that, and Optimus says that he's got his eye on the next relic. He doesn't know what it is yet, but he feels that Megatron and all of his forces are going to go there, but Project Damocles is going to be on their side. So what they need to try and do is think of a way to split their forces. Parts go to the relic, parts go to shut down Damocles from two angles. That way, the cons, they can't expect this, or at least if they do, it will still give them the edge. This can work. They just gotta wait to develop this plan and make sure they know what they're doing, or what they're getting into. At the Nemesis, Silas, now feeling that Damocles has definitely grown into the favor of Megatron, not being shut down, wants to worm his way fully into the ranks of Megatron's Decepticons. And with Damocles not shut down, Megatron is still annoyed at Silas's impertinence, but ultimately, it has proved to force the Autobots to retreat and almost get a few of them fried. So, Megatron, especially with Soundwave still alive, technically, he is feeling in a rather cordial and good mood, and he accepts Silas, but part of it's really sarcastic, because Megatron, and two, it's human, so it's gonna take some time for Megatron to get used to the fact they're teaming with a human. But, you know, it is what it is. Meanwhile, Wheeljack is getting annoyed at just waiting and says that he's really feeling unsure about the whole Soundwave thing, feeling like he failed to kill him and everything. And he says to Optimus, they need to do their plan and they need to do it now. He is done waiting, especially telling him about Soundwave and everything. Optimus, knowing how reckless Wheeljack can be, but knowing what he's saying, agrees that, yes, they've finally found out where the relic that he was talking about earlier is, and now they can actually go about a plan. Some of their forces will go to the relic, others will go to stop Damocles, but they'll stick together for now and do the plan only when they're in the right place, and Wheeljack agrees, feeling victory to finally terminate Soundwave. Smokescreen's training would instead be done with Fowler instead of Jack, so really, it's an easy fix. Meanwhile, Makeshift, Soundwave, is getting really good data and surveillance and everything, and can pretty much detect and feel out the situation that the Autobots will most likely, now that Damocles is still functioning, and now that they got their eyes on the next relic, try to split the forces to combat them. He hasn't heard anything, but he can pretty much sense this. You know, it's Soundwave, and it's Makeshift, so what more could you expect? Anyways, Megatron, feeling that, it sounds pretty accurate, decides they'll split the forces too, to equally combat this. So, Megatron, Dreadwing, and 10 Viacon troopers, they decide to go after the relic, which, if you haven't figured it out by now, is the Star Saber. Meanwhile, Makeshift, Soundwave, just for those who, confuse the two, because it could get confusing, I could understand. Anyway, Makeshift, Soundwave, along with Silas, they go to the area in which the Autobots will most likely try to target Damocles if they hadn't already and gotten onto their signal. It would pretty much be like timing. I'm not going to pretend I know where they'd be. It's just more or less the timing of the moment. Knockout, very begrudgingly, and Megatron forcing him, he goes along too, along with the Insecticons. It's pretty much splitting up the resources and the troops just to equally combat, Optimus's plan, even if they didn't fully know how the Autobots were going to go about it. Neither side knew. It's more or less just a guess. Anyways, Wheeljack, he mans the ship, and soon enough, when they get to a good vantage point in the halfway point of where the relic is, Optimus says that Cliff and RC will join him to go after the Saber, which they now know about to a degree, and Optimus says that those three, him, Cliff, and RC, will go after the relic, the rest will go after Damocles. That way they will have way more on Damocles, and he is confident that him, Cliff, especially Cliff, and RC will be able to get the Saber, especially with all the confusion. So, Bulk, Wheeljack, Smokescreen, and B all go to the direction in which to take out Damocles, while Prime easily gets the Saber like he does with Cliff and RC's help, slices the boulder launched at him, and then casually swipes at the ship. After that, we cut to Wheeljack and the rest of Team Prime advancing to go and take out Damocles. But they're not on their own for long, as Makeshift, Soundwave, is on to their tail with Silas and Knockout and the Insecticons on their tail too. Silas more or less focusing on the rest of Team Prime, while Makeshift, Soundwave, once again still specifying that, focuses on Wheeljack trying to get away from him and get to Damocles. But Makeshift just flies after him, so it's a chase, just like before Soundwave was killed. And Wheeljack knows that either Soundwave's gonna get to him first, or it could be a big explosion that could rupture the ship if he tries to attack Damocles. So he says over the comm link to Bulkhead that he's got a plan. But it's not going to be an easy one, and there's a chance that he could end up risking his life to not only take out Soundwave for good, but Damocles along with him. Now, what is Wheeljack's plan here? Will it work? And if it does, will it end up with him actually biting the dust? Will he miraculously survive? And will it actually take out Soundwave, Makeshift? Or is this all just for nothing to lose another bot?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick.
Bye-bye.
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick and part 11 to What If Cliffjumper Survived. Now, before we get into today's episode, be sure, as always, to smash that like button, subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, and comment future requests for stories that you want to see appear here on the channel, and just your favorite part of the story, stories, or just anything on the channel in particular. With all that out of the way, once you get all that done and stuff, we shall get into today's episode, leaving off with Wheeljack's plan to take out Project Damocles and Makeshift, Soundwave, same difference. And he begins to tell the plan to Bulkhead on the comm link. He says that if they really want to do this, he's got a plan, but it might end up backfiring or just, ending up with him terminated too. He plans to use his grenades and his abilities to his fullest, get Makeshift lured right to Damocles, and then fire the grenades and everything he's got, taking them both out. Bulkhead just, over the comm link, says, no, that is a bad idea because it could very well easily backfire, and even if it works, he doesn't want to lose Wheeljack, but Wheeljack's not listening because we all know about Wheeljack and being him. So he goes through the plan, unsheaths his blades, prepares his grenades, hey, that rhymed, and prepares to enact the plan. But Smokescreen is the first to be the one to, besides Bulkhead, take action in helping with the plan and just trying to halt it as much as possible to keep Wheeljack from dying. He jumps out of the ship and has the face shifter, obviously. Makeshift catches notice of this and prepares to fire the ion blaster at Smokescreen, but this opens him up. Wheeljack prepares a grenade, fires it, and the bomb explodes right at Makeshift in the air. Kind of. They're not that high up. But it actually, the explosion injures Makeshift to a great deal and tears off the screen, which was Soundwave / Makeshift's face. He goes in forward to attack Wheeljack, but Wheeljack just prepares another grenade, throws it, and then this time, for extra effect, knowing what it can do, especially against the likes of Dreadwing, prepares his blaster and then shoots the grenade, especially like what he did with the Insecticons whenever Makeshift was revealed alive in the first place, and just in canon. And this time, we get an even bigger explosion, and once the smoke clears, Makeshift is gravely injured, and now we see his entire face. Now, I know, there's going to be millions and millions of comments, maybe, saying that, oh, even if this was makeshift Soundwave and not actually Soundwave, how do you know that he would have a face? Well, few things. One, it was never revealed because Soundwave's face was always cracked, but never actually fully destroyed. And this is makeshift, so we're allowed to throw in a little T-bone there. So, you know. Anyways, Makeshift now unleashes his laser beak to attack, but Wheeljack just throws one of his blades and disables Makeshift's laser beak. And now, Makeshift Soundwave, even if his face is completely off in the screen and everything, he is now getting more and more used to Soundwave's whole thing and begins to fight for real. But Bumblebee comes in for the save, pushing past Wheeljack and allowing him the chance to recover and fully make sure Damocles is offline, because the explosions did catch Damocles in the process. So there was very well good with that, even if it wasn't, like, known at the time. It mainly was targeted at Makeshift. But while Wheeljack is recovering and making sure Damocles is permanently offline, this is the perfect chance for Silas, the Insecticons, and Knockout to strike, especially with Wheeljack being decently injured. But Smokescreen comes in for the save with the phase shifter, allowing Wheeljack some time to recover and fend off at least the cons and Insecticons that he would be able to with his strength, because he would expend a lot of strength from what he did. Meanwhile, Bumblebee is injured, fighting the likes of Makeshift Soundwave, who, even if his face is torn and everything, is beginning to show off more and more what made Soundwave so formidable. Especially since it's Makeshift, he's actually been given a chance to shine. And now, Silas, Breakdown, whatever the frick, since there's a lot of body swapping and everything like that, just laughs at the Autobots, especially Bulkhead and the others, saying that there's nothing they can do even if Damocles is shut off, and that they should have learned not to interfere in his operations. And this just angers Bulkhead. One, because it's, once again, Breakdown's body, and two, just because of everything that's happening. But Silas prepares to fire at all of them, but Smokescreen comes in for the save with the phase shifter. Makeshift at this point is noticing more and more how annoying that phase shifter is to what has been happening, but Bumblebee is still in this and fires at Makeshift. And at this point, Makeshift might be injured to a good point and everything, with the explosions and Bumblebee fighting him and all that, and no laser beak, but he's also getting more familiar with Soundwave's body and abilities, and he's getting angry. So he prepares the cords and antennas that Soundwave would use, except they're pincers, like swords, and they're targeting straight for Bumblebee. But Wheeljack just goes into car mode with all of his strength, pushes Bumblebee out of the way, and he takes the shot with both sides of his body, where his shoulders are, being pierced through by Makeshift. Yeah, I'm killing off a second Autobot, which is something the original series didn't do. This angers Bumblebee so much that, yeah, if Makeshift wasn't done before, oh, he's certainly done now. He is utterly and completely torn apart by Bumblebee. And yeah, that's the end of Makeshift, Soundwave, and just Soundwave. Bulkhead sees his record partner terminated and dying, and he just knocks Silas out. And with more and more of his anger showing, especially with how much Wheeljack meant to him, he doesn't stop. Oh no, he does not stop. He keeps on pounding and pounding and pounding Silas into a bloody pulp, not even stopping for a sec. It's kind of like what he did to clone Starscream, except much, much worse. But then he is told to and forced to stop by Optimus, who has the Star Saber, and Cliff and RC, who have also come in. And the three of them, as well as all of the other Autobots, have to process that even though they got the relic, took out Damocles and Makeshift Soundwave, and just both of them are gone, they just lost another bot, Wheeljack. And this has hit Bulkhead the most, obviously, and he just looks at Optimus and everything who told him to stop and says, why should I stop? Jackie is dead, and Bulkhead's beginning to get angrier and angrier at all of them, saying, basically turning on a, like, synthetic Ratchet kind of field, saying that they should have killed Megatron when they had the chance, and he's gonna kill all the Decepticons right now. But he then gets slapped in the back of his face by Optimus, saying for him to not be a fool, because he knows how much Wheeljack meant to him and everything. But how much Wheeljack meant to him and Ratchet meant equally, if not much more so, to not only Optimus, but the entire team. It's what drove them to get this far. And if Bulkhead just up and goes after the entire rest of the Decepticons, he won't fare any better than Wheeljack did. Ratchet was just snuffed, but Wheeljack, he was a fighter and he still died. And he just goes off on Bulkhead, which surprises everyone, but to be honest, Optimus hitting Bulkhead and getting this mad, he never really got this mad at all in Prime. And as much as he's out of line, you gotta think of Ratchet dying in this story and then look back at the live action movies, and you gotta think that even if he would be softer here, it's literally how he would act. Silas gets up very, 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 very beaten and just looks to see Optimus and pretty much everyone, including Bulkhead, who really just wants to kill him, arm their weapons straight at him, with him being the only one left there, and saying to stand down and never return. Because Optimus is just as mad, but Bulkhead's the most mad out of everyone here. But Silas just smirks at this, saying that Damocles might have been a failure, and they may have lost a good amount of forces, but the job has ultimately been done. And he says that they should have never messed with Silas's operations. And then he just leaves. Back at the Nemesis, Megatron, Dreadwing, and all the other cons who had left are back on the ship to see Silas return, but no Makeshift, and just Knockout, and no other cons or Insecticons, barely. Just Knockout and him. And he lays on to Megatron the news about Makeshift Soundwave's death, and Megatron is instantly caught on to this and just looks at Silas with the utmost anger and surprise in his eyes. And because Megatron was the detailing of how mad and like emotions that they portrayed on the Megatron in the show were top notch, and it would even show here. And he's thinking about just putting him on Knockout's table like he did in canon, just for him saying this, and that Damocles is gone. But Silas turns the mood around right quick, knowing that this would be Megatron's reaction, saying that even though Damocles failed and Makeshift Soundwave, technically the entire whole of his surveillance chief, is now completely gone with no backup to speak of, the damage was still very much done in the death of Wheeljack, who the Insecticon leader Hardshell failed to kill. And even though Megatron is still very enraged that he now definitely will never have a surveillance chief again, and they lost a good amount of forces along with Damocles actually proving more useful and that turning up to be nothing, he is now actually very much in a better mood because of the death of a second Autobot. And he actually praises Silas for this while lambasting him. Meanwhile, at the base, everyone is lamenting the deaths that have just happened, especially Bulkhead more than anyone there, because not only have we lost one bot in this continuity, but we lost two, and they weren't even original casualties. Ratchet and Wheeljack are the two casualties, and this is really hitting Bulkhead and just everyone really hard. And RC, she can really touch upon this with Bulkhead because of her loss of Tailgate and her knowing how much Ratchet meant to the entire team and how much Wheeljack meant to Bulkhead. But she turns it around or tries to cheer up Bulkhead, saying that even with all this, they're all still here. Optimus is still here. They just need to keep going. And they're all needing to support each other with these losses. But Bulkhead says he doesn't know how he can go on. He just wants to get it all done. Bulkhead is thoroughly tired of losing people, and he just wanted to go through with what he said and just go to the warship, take them all down. Cliffjumper says, as well as he's thought about Starscream and doing all that himself many times, especially after Ratchet and him being partly responsible because him and Optimus just letting Starscream in after that and all that, he says that going to the warship just blindly alone, blinded by rage, Optimus is right. They need to do this and keep their heads on firm. They need to do what they've been doing this entire time. Stick together. And Smokescreen even says that he feels partly to blame. He should have used the phase shifter more. He should have freaking done more with the phase shifter, and that helped them, but he just feels that he's partly to blame because he feels he didn't do enough. And this actually snaps Bulkhead out of most of his rage, and he lets Smokescreen know because this surprises him a lot, and he lets him know that he did probably the most with that phase shifter. It's nobody's fault here that Wheeljack or Ratchet isn't with them today. It's the Khan's fault, and as much as he's blinded by rage, he hates to admit it, but he really can't do anything. They all have to wait and keep together as they have been and keep their heads on straight. Soon enough, after some time passes, Optimus with the Starsaber talks to Alpha Trion and learns the location of, unbeknownst to them, the Omega Keys. And Megatron, now with no surveillance chief and their forces down, even with 2 bots down, still gets Liege Maximo's arm and the Dark Starsaber, unbeknownst to the Autobots. RC and Smokescreen go on the mission to get the first Omega Key, which they don't know what it is yet, and Cliff, obviously, goes along too because, yeah, RC. And the entrance to the Dark Starsaber is brought into the fold. Now, we then get the Smokescreen whole fake out thing with the phase shifter, everybody thinking that he died there, and Cliff is there with RC, and they're not going to let Megatron get the key here, and this, if anything, just motivates them to literally go and kill Megatron. Cliff runs right up to Megatron, elbows the Dark Starsaber out of his hand, which lands on the ground, but Megatron, he just uppercuts Cliffjumper thinking he's gonna get him away, but Cliffjumper just retaliates by back hitting him straight in the face. Cliff is fueled by rage, and he actually back hits Megatron into a flurry of blaster fire from RC. And then blaster fire, very surprising to Cliff and RC, brought in also by Smokescreen, who we obviously know faked out his death because of the whole phase shifter. It's not that he faked it out, but, you know, it was thought to be that way. Then we see that he has the Omega Key also. And Cliff says that even though they're doing good against Megatron, they can't pull a Bulk here and just get themselves blinded by rage since Smoke is obviously alive. And they go to retreat and bring back the key. Megatron tries to go after them, but they get away. And Megatron has the whole monologue about them running and having the power to tear the world apart, except this time it's different because he didn't break Optimus's Starsaber, so Optimus didn't have to have it repaired. And as for Knockout going to get the second key with the Ion Blaster, yeah, that isn't happening here. But Bumblebee and RC are still going after the key with their group, and Cliff, need I say more, is with RC, is going along also. But instead of Knockout, it's Dreadwing who goes after that specific key. He went after the third one, but he's actually going after the second one because of Silas's later pretty much fold into the Decepticons and the fact that he's still around, and it's just timing of it all making Dreadwing the next to get the key. And, you know, all that stuff. Now, we get a similar scene and iconic scene from the video game Transformers Prime, and very poetic to Bumblebee killing Skyquake with Bumblebee fighting Dreadwing while Cliff and RC get the key. Dreadwing, seeing that Bumblebee is not an easy pickings for him, tries to go for his explosives whenever his sword and blaster don't do anything. But Bumblebee just straight up knocks him down, forcing the explosions to just go everywhere, and the whole place surrounded by fire, and Bumblebee and everyone just gets the key and books it. Meanwhile, Megatron is now perturbed because even though it seems like him and the bots are on equal footing with losses, the Decepticons have a little bit more, and it's like Megatron's on a win-lose kind of attitude battle with himself over the whole ordeal, especially with Starscream still out there. And the bots and cons know this about Starscream too, but he continues being, you know, him with convincing himself that the bots will fall, considering they lost two of their own. This is where we would get the scene where Starscream begins to mess with the red Energon, and then we would get the third key with Bulkhead, Smokescreen, and the whole Dreadwing fight, which Dreadwing just fought here, so that's obviously not going to happen. But another thing isn't going to be the same. Starscream, given more time being by himself and having more time, especially with the red Energon, actually has enough for a full-on container, which means he has way more red Energon than he did before. What will he do with this, especially knowing what he did with the synthetic Energon? And could this lead to Starscream being even more potent in this already blazing story with him and Cliff and the rest of the story?
Why am I asking you all these questions?
Find out in the next episode on the Omniverse of Nick.
See red, I see red.
Burn it down till all the see now is red, 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 red.
Welcome everyone to the finale of What If Cliffjumper Survived, as well as the Omniverse of Nick. And before we get into today's episode, be sure, as always, to smash that like button, subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick, and comment your favorite part of this current series, as well as future requests for stories and discussions to happen on this channel in the future. Once you got all that out of the way, we shall commence with today's episode and the finale to the Cliff story. We wrapped up with Starscream having a lot more red Energon than in canon. But before we get into that, which will be the highlight of this episode and finale, we cut to the Nemesis. Silas, at the Nemesis with Megatron and the Decepticons, says that he wishes to go after the next Omega Key since Dreadwing went in Knockout's place, and now Silas wants to go in his, which would originally be his in canon. You guys know the drill if you've seen the show. And he says that he might have failed to keep Damocles going, but he feels that Wheeljack's death earns him an extra place along with Damocles' more prominent success in this story. Megatron is definitely surprised that a human could go this far, still get his surveillance chief killed, mind you, and still go this far and still want more and want to prove himself. Originally, Megatron just wanted to ice him and put him on the table with Knockout, especially for what happened to Breakdown. But you know what? Megatron says that he doesn't know if Silas is truly worthy enough as of late as for what has happened to the Decepticon cause to go after the next key. But then Knockout pipes up and says he'll go alongside and he'll help get the next key to ensure maximum securing of the artifact. I'm sure the Decepticons, especially without Soundwave, they would not know a jack thing about the Omega keys. But Megatron remains even more unconvinced because of Knockout's equal failure and why he would want to team with the guy who dissected Breakdown. But Knockout just says he wants even more than what Silas wants. Proof he's a worthy Decepticon. And what better way for two people who have literally not rose up to the task enough than to do Megatron the favor of getting this key personally. Silas says all he cares about is proving himself regardless. He's making up for the whole Soundwave makeshift and then the Damocles failure, sure, but he's not going nearly as far with it as Knockout is. But Megatron still says, as much as he remains unconvinced, Silas has proved his mettle with some causes. So, he agrees, but he says to both of them with dead eyes, you better return with the article or not at all. Afterwards, going on to get the relic, article, whatever the frick you want to call it, Silas confronts Knockout and is very surprised to see him stepping up to team up with him. Even if it's to prove himself highly and everything, he'd expect Knockout to dice him on the first opportunity. Especially after what happened to, the host he's wearing body, in pretty much mocking about Breakdown a little bit. Knockout is really angry about this, and honestly, yes, he really should have just tased Silas on the first opportunity. But he holds himself back as he has, because his loyalty to Megatron matters kind of a bit more than his loyalty to Breakdown, in a way. You know what I'm saying? In a way, it's weird. Meanwhile, Bulkhead and Smokescreen, like Cannon, are going out to retrieve the key. And that doesn't change. The two of them are still going to go. And once they get there, they encounter Knockout, who fights Smokescreen, and Silas, who begins a brawl with Bulkhead. And this would honestly go the same as their first encounter, except Bulkhead has more room to stand on, literally, and is much more able to put up a fight. And this time, even though he did fight him another time to help out before Wheeljack was killed, that wasn't really a fight. Here is an all-out brawl, and it's a big one. But it doesn't remain two-sided for long, as Silas plainly sees within given time. He sees utter fury in the eyes of Bulkhead. He doesn't notice it at first while they're brawling, but soon enough, Bulkhead begins to pick up more and more and more against Silas and begins to overpower him. Meanwhile, Smokescreen phase shifts Knockout as he does in Cannon, but he phase shifts him through a tree instead of the side of a ship. So just imagine Knockout or just any Decepticon being basically stuck inside a tree. Would be even more hilarious. Silas tries to take more of the offensive, seeing that Bulkhead's getting angrier and stronger and fiercer, pulling out two hammers, his guns, whatever he can do with Breakdown's body and everything. But then Bulkhead pulls a move out that he used against an early con that he actually uses in this story. He rips out cords in the center of Breakdown Silas's chest, and it pulls Silas out of Breakdown's corpse. So now we have a bruised and broken and battered and bloody and everything Silas on the ground out of Breakdown. And Bulkhead's about to finish him off and just go crazy when all of a sudden a claw strike hits Bulkhead square in the stomach, which would be the first time that this has happened, and then another hits him straight in the eye, like Ice Shenron, if you will. Call it that. Meanwhile, Smokescreen's bragging about the phase shifter and taunting Knockout when we see who the assailant of Bulkhead was, Starscream. And he goes to attack Smokescreen next like he did in canon, actually, but unfortunately for him, Smokescreen still had the phase shifter on. So he is able to take the ground and smack Starscream to the ground when he figures out he was just attacked. Starscream's very surprised to see this happen, and Smokescreen just lambasts Starscream, feeling very much in the high mood right now with putting Knockout in a tree, and says, "You clearly didn't see what happened the first time you encountered me," and points to the phase shifter, which, to be fair, in this story with Cliff around, Starscream didn't know about the phase shifter. So Smokescreen has the upper hand here and starts to fire incessantly at Starscream, not seeing Bulkhead anywhere around. So he just fires at Starscream, who gets up, uses the red energon to his advantage, and actually outpaces every shot that Smokescreen makes. So he can't do anything. It's like Ultra Instinct Starscream, if you will. And with this, in the moment's weakness, he swipes the phase shifter. So now Smokescreen is the one on the back foot, but this ain't gonna make him give up. It's Smokescreen. So he keeps on firing, but we all know it's not gonna do anything, especially not with the phase shifter in Starscream's hand. Now Starscream is the one to be overconfident and high and mighty and this, that, and the other thing. And he begins to taunt Smokescreen and everything, and is almost about to just go over quickly with the red energon and just swipe his spark out. But then he gets two wrecking balls slammed directly into his head, like that one con. Basically, Bulkhead's pulling out like early con tricks against a later opponent, which is Starscream. And now Starscream, having this happen to him, obviously is feeling immense head damage and just damage as a whole, and actually collapses to the ground in utter pain and agony from a Bulkhead whose eye is just spewing out energon from all sides, because this was a strong strike, and we all know how sharp Starscream's claws were. And Bulkhead has him on the ropes now, very angry. But Starscream, he just uses the red energon and sees that he can't win this fight. He obviously, with what just happened. So he enables the red energon, and without Bulkhead or Smokescreen realizing it, just assuming the body on the ground is just Silas dead, Starscream actually swipes Silas's human body off the ground and gets away. Smokescreen's very happy to see Bulkhead still alive, but then he sees what actually happened to Bulkhead, and he gasps, because now he sees Bulkhead's eye, and his chest, that's just a dent, because we all know it was just a dent in canon, so it would be a dent here. But his eye, that's the main concern, and now Smokescreen realizes how much of a threat Starscream really is. And Bulkhead says, truer words were never spoken, but he's fine. He's had much worse pains being the early days of a wrecker and everything. And Wheeljack would be one to tell him, but, he's dead. And says that, while Starscream might still be a threat, he's a small one compared to the cons and everything. That's the main deal. And luckily for both of them, Starscream didn't swipe the key, because he likely didn't know what it was. So this means that they have an extra key on their belt, because Starscream wasn't around to hear a conversation ensue about reviving Cybertron and everything. So Starscream would have no reason to swipe the key. So Bulkhead and Smokescreen just return to base. Meanwhile, Starscream at the Harbinger looks in utter evil glee at a very slowly dying Silas, who without breakdown is literally on the cusps of death. But thanks to Starscream wanting to use him to his own ends, for whatever ends are not known yet, he just decides to heal him, but in his own twisted way. For now, he's just leaving him there. And Silas is slowly still alive and sees Starscream standing over him. And Starscream just finds this poetic irony that but a short time ago it was him who was on the ground while Silas was standing over him. And this would be like a Starscream Megatron role reversal, except Silas is Megatron in this scenario. So, the irony here. And Starscream says, "You better rest up, because once I actually put my mind into healing you and getting you on your feet, we have a lot to discuss." Meanwhile, at the base of the Autobots, Optimus and everyone has to deal with what just happened. Because even though it wasn't super big, it did result in Bulkhead having to get good medical care without Ratchet and get his eye back in shape, which wasn't too hard of a task, but it was still pretty, decent of a care unit to put in. And they had to make sure that the keys were safe, yada yada, other small stuff. And Optimus realizes that even if Bulkhead wasn't gravely injured, Starscream is still just as much a threat, if not more so, than Megatron and the Cons. And he says that they're lucky that they're not only alive, but that the key didn't get swiped, because that could have very well been a backfiring moment right there. But concern is all still the rising factor here, with Starscream still out there, even if he doesn't know about the keys, and now being even faster with this red energon, and the fact the Cons are still out there. They'll slowly start to realize what the Omega keys are, even without Soundwave, and the fact that Silas was missing, because they eventually figured it out. And if Starscream swiped Silas too, whether or not he lives, that could pose major trouble, which is why Starscream is just as much a threat. They all need to keep on the search for the keys and keep going with their mission, but even more carefully than before. And the Autobots all agree. Meanwhile, on the Nemesis, Megatron is utterly infuriated. His surveillance chief gone, the backup of him gone, the all too consistent falls of parts of his army, with only 2 bots slayed in the Autobots' name, and now Silas has just been abducted by Starscream and the relic isn't theirs. So now Megatron is done playing, especially with Starscream in the mix. And now Megatron is at a point where he just says, literally, screw it. And he summons the entire Seeker army and flyers of the rest of his army, and decides that him personally, Dreadwing, and the entire army, including the Insecticons, are going to confront the Autobots and Starscream on this planet and blow up the whole planet if they have to. Literally. They are at that point. At the Harbinger, Starscream detects the Decepticons on the move. Literally seems the whole army. And Starscream guesses they're looking for both him and the Autobots. But he could not think of a better time, as now he can truly put his plan into action. Silas is now much more awake, but again, still slowly dying, because he hasn't been fully healed. He's been healed enough with Starscream's whatever he would have, to a point where he can speak and somewhat sit up. And he's scared and doesn't know what Starscream's gonna do to him. But with Silas at the point of seeing Starscream, Starscream looks over, and now he explains his plan. He's now going to use Silas to his own ends, as Silas used him for his. And this is the perfect opportunity. And he taunts Silas. He says that he should have never taken him down on his offer of the synthetic energon and the T-Cogs. He would have never known any of that if it weren't for him. He should be on his knees begging for life right now, but in the sorry state that he's in, you can't really see how. But that's not the point. The point is, Silas will work for him one way or another, now that should really pay off the debt of what he gave to him back then. If he don't, he's going to personally put him down for good. And maybe if he actually works with him, he'll get something out of it. And he literally gets up in Silas's bloody, broken face and asks him if they're clear for a deal. Silas takes a minute to reflect on this, because on one hand, he really thinks that he should just be put down without a body, really. And this one being crippled, he doesn't know how Starscream could fix that. And that's just it. It's Starscream. The guy who was with him in the past, he treated wrong. He's not willing to admit that because it's Silas, but he's in a real pickle. But in all intents and purposes, he doesn't have an option because Starscream said it would literally kill him. It's blackmail, but Silas just says he'll go along with it. But on one condition. He gets healed to the utmost extreme, his body fully back to good use, and he gets something out of it by getting Breakdown's corpse still reliable and usable to him if he's really going to have to go along with all this. He wants something out of it. And Starscream, seeing as Silas is willing to be cooperative, he complies with this, but he feels that Silas will just turn traitor on him at any moment, so he is sure to watch his own back in that regard. He prepares the remote ground bridge and gets his own energon supplies, or what he would find near the area, as well as red energon that he has, and with time heals Silas, and it pretty much is all a mix at the time and hard to work with the materials, but Silas is able to be fully brought back and is able to walk and function as his normal human body could. Pretty much back to full health. Now, how in the world does this happen? Well, we know in canon, when Raphael was shot with the Dark Energon, Ratchet and Nurse Darby and all them, they combined Energon with Dark Energon to meet it head on. So, if you think about it, Raph, in the end, would have Energon in his body, which would still allow him to live in the end. Now, it's obvious that Silas wasn't put into Breakdown because at that point Breakdown was dead, so there likely wouldn't be any Energon left in him, but I'm going to take the fact that he was wired into Breakdown's corpse with mech and the fact that the Energon would mix into him like it did with Raphael and basically combine the two. I feel that it would work, especially with red Energon. You never know. It's just a guess. But Starscream says that this should put Silas on his side 100%. And Silas has to admit, he actually feels a lot better than when he had his original body before. It feels like a new body, so to speak. But then again, he does look down in sadness, seeing that he not only has been put into the situation, but he has no mech soldiers and he's literally been forced into all this. It just doesn't feel right as to working with Megatron, working with mech. It's a very awkward situation for Silas. But Starscream says now the plan of his can finally begin to overthrow the warship with its little forces and take down the bots and cons. He prepares a ground bridge with his remote, but Breakdown's body is still on the ground. And Starscream lets Silas in on a little secret. While he was sleeping, Starscream rewired components of Breakdown's corpse and actually made a hatch so that Silas could step in like a remote robot Cybertronian and actually close the latch. It'd be like he never left the body. It's just, it would be a different way. He wouldn't be stuck in there like he was before. And Silas, this actually does capture his attention, but his eyes look up to Starscream as if to say, all right, let's get on with it. The old Silas. And this really catches Starscream. Now he feels he'll really turn on him. But he just brushes this aside for his ultimate plan and his ego and gets into the ground bridge with Silas in tow, and they enter the Decepticon warship. Starscream is very much sitting pretty in his own world right now. He never thought that up to this point, with his many, many setbacks, that it would be this easy. He's had so much victory, but so much failure. But this feels like he's literally on top of the world right now. But then he hears behind him a weapon begin to enable itself. And Starscream just should have guessed. And without even turning around to face his assailant, he just sticks his hand and claws straight behind him, and this not only goes through Breakdown's entire corpse body, but it actually impales, decapitates, and severs Silas in the process, killing him instantly. Because Starscream wasn't playing. And to make absolute sure that Silas never comes back, he shoots and claws Breakdown's corpse to utter nothingness. Literally, the pieces that it was from when Arachnid killed him make that quadruple, if not 5 times more so. Now, let me explain. Starscream, from the get-go, knew that Silas would betray him and try to basically get power over him, or just stay with his side of Megatron. It was basically a gamble, and Starscream knew it from the start. He was betting on either taking out Silas at a later date when he finally rose to power, or literally just icing him at the first opportunity when he did try to kill him, which was this scenario. Starscream inadvertently alerted the cons that are left on the warship, the vehicle ones, the car ones, not the flyers, because they all went out with Megatron and Dreadwing. And Knockout is there too. And he and the cons are very surprised to see Starscream here. And Starscream's surprised to see Khan still on the warship and Knockout there. I mean, there's no flyers and no big bots, because clearly they all went with Megatron all over the globe to search for him and the bots. He could detect that much. And this actually makes his moment even better, because now he can use the cons on this warship to his own end, even better than what was the deal with Silas. And he says that they should all be thanking him. Now he can be their leader once again. And he even looks over and says that he did Knockout the most favor of all. And Knockout and the other cons just look over to see Silas, Breakdown, whatever the frick you want to call him, in millions of pieces. And Knockout is very surprised at this. Not only that the fact that Starscream was the one to do this, clearly with the noises and everything, but the fact that it happened so fast, and that Starscream was the one to do it. It's just all out of nowhere. But Starscream says that not only was this just expected of him to eventually, in the end, triumph over Silas, who once wronged him and took his T-Cog, but it also was just poetic justice that Silas was outdid by a con after outdoing cons. And he should be thanking him, Knockout, because he avenged Breakdown. Knockout is still very perturbed by this, especially coming from Starscream, and this actually annoys Starscream because he brings up the fact that once he wanted Megatron dead, same as him. So if anything, they should be sharing this new alliance that he's preparing for them. The cons here can either do one of two things. They can either fall in line with him, as they once did when Megatron wasn't the leader and he was seemingly dead, or he can just ice them all just like Silas. And Ratchet, who he brings up. he would finally have people to gloat about killing fully. And Knockout and the other cons, not seeing an out of this and actually agreeing with Starscream on many levels for who he once was, decide to inevitably go with it, not seeing an ultimately better option. So with that, Starscream has assumed total control over the warship and its denizens. And at the Autobot base, Optimus and the bots see that Megatron, as well as pretty much the entire Decepticon army, are out, and they know, Prime knows, why. They're looking for him and likely Starscream too. But Starscream, whenever he'll show up with Silas or whatever, them not knowing the whole thing, they'll have to wait, because they can't let Megatron and the Decepticons harm the human population. They have to fight. So he tells the Autobots to prepare every single thing at their disposal, because this is going to be one fight that they likely have to finish for good. And he says his iconic thing, Autobots, prepare to roll out. Except this would be the most serious rollout, considering Prime in this story and the seriousness of the moment. So, in a deep, vast wasteland in the outskirts of Jasper, Nevada, is the big moment of this finale. Megatron, as well as Dreadwing, the entire Decepticon army, meaning the Flyers, obviously, the Seeker army and such, as well as the rest of the Insecticons, meet Team Prime with the absence of Ratchet and Wheeljack, but the add-on of Smokescreen, all meet and focus themselves in the center of this wasteland in Jasper. I know I'm mentioning it again, but it's just for context. But anyways, Megatron faces the Autobots down, all of them, and says that this finally ends now. It's time that they finally ended this and stopped playing around with small little moments, collectings, and just slide off the chivalry and finally end this war. And without further fanfare, he just launches himself at Optimus and the bots. And this is where we would get the first clash of the Dark Starsaber versus the OG Starsaber. Meanwhile, while they're fighting, slowly, all the bots and cons during this immense struggle see the Nemesis begin to fly overhead. Megatron, he actually stops and is very confused by this, because he didn't order Knockout and the cons to come here, and even if they came here, it would just be small help at best. No. And then his eyes grow even more wide. Starscream is up at the top of the ship, howling with maniacal laughter, seeing Megatron and everyone in immense shock. And with this, he is literally on top of the world, and this would be the most piped up that we would ever see Starscream. And from there on, he yells, "Let the reign of Lord Starscream begin." And he prepares the remote ground bridge, the red energon, every single article on the warship, and any con there for an all-out war to destroy the bots and cons. And this would be big. Megatron is utterly infuriated beyond immeasurable doubt. The most he's ever been in his entire existence. Because Starscream, especially Starscream, he should have known that he should have iced him at the first opportunity. And now, it literally has come to bite him with his ship being stolen by Starscream. And he acknowledges he can't do this alone with his ship and Starscream having this much. So he looks to Optimus, saying that they once teamed up to save this world from Unicron, just for them to get right back at it. But now he will begrudgingly do it again, But he tells Optimus to not destroy his ship in the process. Just destroy Starscream and any con on his ship who dares pledge allegiance to Starscream. Optimus says and thinks that it's pretty much nigh impossible to be able to not destroy the ship with Starscream utilizing it in the way he is and what he has, but teaming up with Megatron to stop Starscream in his pretty much unstoppable reign as of now, they don't really have much of a choice than to try and go along with it, and he's just glad to be teaming up with Megatron. So Megatron's whole army, as well as all of Team Prime, focus their efforts squarely on Starscream and the warship for the biggest battle of history. And with that, this ultimately puts this Transformers first story of mine at an end. Now, how, if any of you are Transformers Prime fans or anything like that, you guys are probably asking, how can you end it like that? Well, I'll explain, because I hit a roadblock here, but it allowed me to wrap up the story in a way that would work. So, with Optimus and Megatron teaming up in that moment against Starscream, who would have full command over the ship, before I got to that scene, I had a decision to make. I was either going to make Silas kill Starscream and him take over and possibly either go against Megatron, like Starscream, or actually use the warship in Megatron's favor and destroy the Autobots, which would have been kind of a dark ending, or they would have just gotten away. Who knows how I would have really written in the rest of Silas's play, or even that section in general. Or I would have had Starscream and Silas team up, which, because of Silas, how he was, and how I built in sort of a, connection or development with Starscream and Silas, I really thought that Silas trying to turn on Starscream would have worked, and Starscream would have known about it and wouldn't have fallen query to how he did when he met Silas, and especially in this story. Now, I know you guys are asking, how do you wrap up the story like this? Well, I'll explain. Whenever Starscream shows up with the ship and Megatron and everyone, they team up and everything, it would basically end in the way that Megatron wouldn't want it to. So basically, it would be on Megatron's own behalf and Starscream's, if you will, and I'll explain. Because the Nemesis wasn't actually, destroyed in a way until basically the end of the franchise. And even then, in the crappy bootlegged sequel, I'm pretty sure they had it still around. But here, Optimus would almost be literally given no choice. With Starscream having way more red energon, Knockout and the cons would be on his side, because we saw, even if some of them were steadfast to Megatron, especially Dreadwing, it would... Knockout and Starscream pretty much had a bromance throughout the entirety of the show. Heck, both of them even teamed to wanting to literally mercy kill Megatron. So here, Knockout and all the cons that would be left on the ship would basically just be on Starscream's side. So with Red Energon, the Nemesis, and every other con and weapon at their disposal, it would basically lead to Megatron not being able to get the jump on anyone fully, barely making a compelling case, Dreadwing getting himself killed trying to go against Starscream, who used Skyquake's, Terracon to try and kill the Autobots, it being much different in this story without any humans, and Optimus and maybe even Megatron unfortunately having to destroy the Nemesis in some way, shape, or form way of getting the jump on Starscream. But the Red Energon, even though the Nemesis's destruction would lead to almost every Khan's death on the ship except for Starscream and Megatron, the battle would not end there. We would still have all of Team Prime, and now an angry, vengeful Megatron and the rest of the Khans, along with Starscream just by himself to deal with. And after that, a war would enrage. I'm not going to say that any more of the Autobots would fall, but I do believe that ones like Cliffjumper and RC, who had meant so much with Cliffjumper's survival, how much he meant now, would ultimately sacrifice themselves if the battle went sideways. But with how the story has gone, with how I've just said it here, I'm thinking that it would just lead to Team Prime, especially with the Star Saber, and barely any Khans left, literally getting the jump on Megatron, Starscream, and the franchise basically ending there, with the only exceptions and changes being that Starscream and Knockout are killed, Ratchet and Wheeljack are not in the picture, and the only human influence throughout the entirety of the story here would be Agent Fowler. And that would be it. And they would have left the Autobot base a lot sooner because of the scraplets and the humans not being there. Many times, like even in some sections, I'd be like, well, the story's ended there. It's like a Dale situation, but way different, because it's not a dream or a vision. This is literally how the story would go, with Team Prime ultimately coming out on top, but it would ultimately end the show a season later in the good way, even if it would be unwillingly wanting to kill Megatron, like Optimus said that he didn't want to. But ultimately, at this point, with Ratchet and Wheeljack's deaths, Prime's character in this show would be dramatically changed. It would be more like the live-action Transformers, and his character would be a lot different. As for, that's going to be the next thing. What about the next season? You still had like 16 episodes and a movie to cover. There's no way you could just bottle it up with that. But I can. Because with the Omega Lock and Team Prime having the keys and not having to worry about the humans, bar Agent Fowler, they would be able to revitalize and revive Cybertron without any Khan interference because of this. And this would lead to them getting back to Cybertron in the beginning of Season 3. But there is one unfinished problem, though. Shockwave. He would still be alive, and so would Predaking. But even with a weaker Optimus Prime and no Super Optimus Prime, I do feel that with the Star Saber and all of Team Prime and what they've been through, Shockwave and Predaking alone, they wouldn't be able to keep up. Ultra Magnus would eventually come to see that Cybertron has been fixed, and he would be there to help out too, so that's an extra hand. After that, there would be no Super Optimus Prime, and Bumblebee, I feel, would get his voice back most likely. I don't feel that he got his voice back because of the cyber matter. He only got revived because of getting shot. He only got revived because of the cyber matter. So he would get his voice back in time, because the live action movies even proved that he could get it back in time. And after that, the end movie would ultimately, I feel, possibly either not happen or it would go almost the same exact way, except no Wheeljack and a weaker Optimus. But overall, that's the end of the story. Cliffjumper's involvement means that Team Prime overall, being weaker a little than they were, and less, added with the humans, they would still be able to pull through, and Cliffjumper would pull his weight, which is what, honestly, I think should have happened, meaning that Cliffjumper, RC, and Starscream would become utter rivals throughout the end, which would ultimately cause Starscream's end for thinking that even with Red Energon and the Nemesis, he could take over. But we all know that with Starscream, it never works out, which would ultimately lead to Prime ending a lot sooner. But that's the story. That is the story of what if Cliffjumper survived. Now, I know it was kind of bottled into a finale like this. Honestly, I didn't intend to write it like this, and I hope that you guys aren't deterred by this as my first Transformers What If, because I think I did really good with many moments in the series. It's just when I got to this part, and, Starscream taking over the Nemesis, bottling it up like this has just felt like the best way to end the story. And a good start to the Transformers What Ifs. Now, since this is done, my next project is going to be another one-off, which is what if John Wick was in The Walking Dead? And that's basically going to touch upon who he would utterly decimate, who he would be able to be on par with, what weapons he would use or come across, and how he would deal with the walkers or fit into the story. I'm not going to spoil every single little detail, because it's going to be probably, besides the Jigsaw one and the Jason one, my most in-depth crossover as of yet, because it's freaking John Wick. And I was going to do Harry Potter, which many of you probably know from the schedules and everything, but honestly, Harry Potter's just one of those things that I look at now. With how it is in the universe, it's just better left watched, not looked into as what-ifs and stuff like that. But I do hope that you guys enjoyed this Cliffjumper story. Look forward soon to the John Wick one-off, because it's going to be pretty frickin' intense and cool to look into. Now, I'll see you guys then.
Everything I see is red.
Tear it down, then paint this town red, red, red.